Welcome to Learn Skills Daily, Google Sheets. Hi, I'm Angelo Eurico. I'm a New York State certified teacher and administrator, and I'm a Google for Education certified trainer. This video is Introduction to Google Sheets, and we'll be covering topics such as what is Google Sheets, getting to know the Sheets interface and entering data, understanding formulas and functions, formatting your spreadsheet, and more. So what is Google Sheets? Google Sheets is an online spreadsheet program that lets you create and format spreadsheets and collaborate with others. It is similar to Microsoft Excel and is made up of columns and rows. Businesses, schools, and nonprofit organizations use spreadsheets for many purposes to organize information, perform calculations, and create graphs. A spreadsheet is made up of columns. This is column A. A spreadsheet is made up of rows. This is row 2. The intersection of a column and a row is known as a cell. This is cell A2. You can enter text and numbers into cells on your spreadsheet. You can create formulas that perform calculations. Let's get started. To get started with Google Sheets, my recommendation is to start in your Google Drive. This is the place where all of your Google files are stored. So what's great about starting here is that you could be inside of a folder where you have projects going on, and when you start a new spreadsheet, that spreadsheet will be inside of that particular folder. So I can go to the New button and notice all of the different things I can do here, and one is to click on Google Sheets. So New, Google Sheets. And a new tab opens with an untitled spreadsheet. And this is the preferred way to get started with a blank spreadsheet. Just to show you a couple of other things, I'm going to go back to the tab for Google Drive on my browser. And when you click on New and go down to Google Sheets, if you went over to the right and hovered over that arrow, you would get presented with blank spreadsheet, which is the default, which is what happened when we clicked on Google Sheets, or from template. And when you choose from template, you're presented with, well, the ability to start a blank spreadsheet, but the ability to choose one of these pre-designed formats or templates. Maybe one of these templates fit your need pretty exactly. Maybe you can take one of these templates and just modify it to fit your needs. Again, I'm going to go back up and over to my Google Drive tab just to show you one more thing before we get started. One other way while in your Google Drive, or for that matter, in any Google product, even such as Gmail, all the way in the upper right is a 9-dot menu called Google Apps. And when you click on that, you can get to all of the Google apps that are available to you. And as I scroll down a little bit, this is where you'll see Sheets and Docs and Slides. And so this is yet another way to get started with Google Sheets. However, as I said, I highly recommend using your Google Drive as your main base, your main starting point, and go inside of your Drive and into a folder where you might want that Google Sheet to reside. So when you click the New button, that sheet will already be inside of the folder where you want it. A word about using and importing Microsoft Excel spreadsheets in Google Sheets. So Google Sheets has the ability to not only read, but to allow you to modify Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. So here you see my practice file is a .xlsx. It's a Microsoft Excel file. And I previously used the new file upload command to upload this spreadsheet to this Google Drive folder. So when I double click on this Excel spreadsheet on my Google Drive, I appear inside of that spreadsheet. I can click in there, I can navigate through there, and I can even modify this spreadsheet. Okay, and as with other things in Google Drive, things are automatically saved. So you could see up above here in green that that is an Excel file. However, I guess I could say one advantage of keeping the file as an Excel file is one, if you may need to have to return this file to someone who uses Microsoft Excel and maybe not uses Google Sheets. So for some reason, you want to keep this in Excel formatting because maybe you or you along with others are going back and forth between Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel. However, if someone sent you this spreadsheet and now you're solely going to continue working on it inside of a Google Sheets only, then it might be a good idea for you to save it as a Google Sheet. So when I go up to the File menu, I could choose the button, the command, Save as Google Sheets. And now I'll have the Google Sheet version of it. So you'll run into less problems in the future working in the native Google Sheets version of this spreadsheet. And you can disregard the Excel spreadsheet version of this file from that point forward. So in summary, leave it as an Excel spreadsheet. If you don't have to do much manipulation at all, you're just simply viewing it occasionally, or you have to return this to someone that uses Microsoft Excel, or you yourself have to use this in Microsoft Excel for some reason. Otherwise, you may like to choose File, Save as Google Sheets. A little bit about the Google Sheets interface. So that we're all in the same place, I'm going to go ahead and close down these 3 tabs with all these demonstrations that I did before. And let's all go ahead, start in our Google Drive, click New, Google Sheets. Go ahead now, pause the video and make sure you get to this point before we continue. Over on the right, a pop-up menu appeared called Tables. We're not going to get into that right now, so I'll go ahead and close that, and you can go ahead and do that as well. So we should all be in an untitled sheet at the moment. As you look around the Google Sheet, in the upper left, we have an area where the name of our spreadsheet will go. And right now it's called Untitled Spreadsheet. So when we're ready, we're going to give it a name. Below that, you see the menu. And below that, you see what I call the toolbar, right? These are shortcut buttons. You're probably familiar with things like the font size and bold and italics, but there's also other things like the fill color and alignment and other things and special tools that have to do with spreadsheets. We have our rows. This is where the name of the spreadsheet will be. Later, we will name our spreadsheet. This is the menu where you will find all of the commands needed in Google Sheets. This is the toolbar where you will find buttons that are shortcuts to commands that are relatively common. You might recognize some, like the font point size and bold and italics, but there are others that are unique to spreadsheets. This is the cell address area and the formula bar. These are your column headings, and these are your row numbers. There are scroll bars on the right side and on the bottom, along with arrows that you can use to navigate up and down and left and right on your spreadsheet. This is the tabs area. A Google Sheet can have many sheets within it, and each will be identified by their own tab down here on the bottom. So you can have several different sheets that are related to the same project. And last but not least is the share command. We'll get into this later in our more advanced video, but it's safe for you to know that without using that command, the spreadsheet is for your eyes only on your Google Drive. And until you're ready to share it with others, that will remain so. We're going to take a special look at the File menu. We'll go through these commands real quickly. We have the New command, which you're familiar with, and I recommend using Google Drive to start a new spreadsheet, but nonetheless, you can do so from here. You can open an existing Google Sheet. You can import from your computer or from your Google Drive a file type. Maybe it's a CSV file, which is a data file that comes from another database program, or you can import a Microsoft Excel sheet and so forth. The make a copy command is really useful. So it's a little different than when using a software program on your computer. And so when you're in a spreadsheet that you like, the way it is, and you're looking to make another spreadsheet similar to that one, you choose make a copy, and it leaves the original one intact. And now you have a full copy of that, and you can immediately start manipulating that and then rename that copy. We talked about the share command, which is available in the upper right of your screen, and we'll get to that in our advanced section. Notice you can download your Google Sheet in many formats. You can download it as an Excel. You can download it as a PDF, which is great for sending to someone who only needs to view it and maybe more likely to want to print it. You could download it as a CSV or a comma separated value, which is what's needed to import into another database type program. You can rename your sheet, which can also be easily done another way. You can make available offline, which sometimes is useful if you have a Chromebook and you travel around and you're not always online. And probably won't get into settings during this course. And then the print command is very useful and very popular. When we click on the print command, and we see a lot of options over on the right, what to print in landscape or portrait, fit, change the margins, so forth. And we'll get into more of this later. We are almost ready to start entering data into our spreadsheet, but just to review and cover a couple more general things, you now know how to start a Google Sheet. I recommend going to the Google Drive to do that, but there are other ways to do that through the File menu as well. And here we are all in a blank spreadsheet. You should know that once we start entering data, your Google Sheet automatically saves. There is no save command, so it's not necessary to do that. Like with a lot of other Google products, your work is saved as you go along. I'd like to point out at this time the Help menu. Help is always a useful feature, and you should give it a try early on as you're learning the program. There are two main ways. You can search the menus, and when you find that item that you think might have been in a menu, you can choose that, and it does that command for you right then and there. And the other way is a more general search and learning how to do something, and that is Sheets Help. And when you go there, you'll be able to look up, maybe you're looking about formatting, and you can learn more about formatting there. In a moment, I'm going to have you try the Help menu. So what you'll do is you'll go to Help, and you'll go to Sheets Help, and spend a minute just taking a look at that. So pause the video now and give that a try. Now we're going to get into entering and manipulating data. So I'm going to click in cell A1 to begin entering data. We're going to build a spreadsheet together for a fictitious store where we sell supplies. So I'm going to title this column of data Item. After I type the first item and I want to go over to the right to B1, instead of letting go of the keyboard and going over to my mouse, I can hit the Tab key. The Tab key enters that data and moves the cell indicator over to the right. So we have item, quantity, sold, tab, cost per item, tab, total sales. And I don't need to go over to the right anymore, but I want to move down to cell A2 to start entering data. And so instead of hitting tab, I can hit enter, and the spreadsheet program knows that that's where I began typing my data. So it's helpful for keeping the hands on the keyboard to type in the rest of your information. Before I continue entering in my data, I can see that I have a small typo in cell D1 in that I didn't capitalize the T for total, and I would like to do that. So I could come back, I could point to this cell, and I could double click on that cell. When I double click on that cell, it puts the blinking cursor inside there. So I can use my mouse to click right where I want, right after the T, hit backspace and shift T to put the capital T in, hit enter. And now it doesn't know to go back to A2, but that's okay. While my hands are on my keyboard, I can use my arrow keys to arrow over to my left. So depending on where your hand is, if it's on the mouse or on the keyboard, there are more efficient ways for navigating around, and I'll continue interjecting those tips as we go along. So here I am ready to start entering in my items that sold. So pen, tab, 57, tab. Cost per item is $2.99. So 2, and we use the period as our decimal, 2.99. And now I'm going to hit enter. I don't want to type anything over to the right in total sales because we're going to generate a formula to do that for us. So I hit enter, and it jumps down to below pen. And I can continue pencil, tab, quantity sold, 219, tab, cost per item, 0.49. And I hit enter. And again, it knows to go back down to the beginning of my data in the blank row that's next. So my hands stay on the keyboard, entering the data, hitting tab to get across, hitting enter when I get to the third column and want to go back to the first column to continue entering. So I'm going to show you a set of data, and then I'm going to ask you to pause the video to get all of this data entered in. Here is the full set of data that you are going to enter in, and your objective here is to keep your hands on the keyboard. So you enter in the item, hit tab to get over to the next cell, hit tab to get over to the next cell. And after you type in the last item across in column C, you hit enter, and that brings your cell pointer down here. If you make a mistake and you have to get back around, use your arrow keys. Like right now, I'm using my arrow keys on my keyboard to get around. And you can simply type over the item to correct it. That's just another way that you can enter in data. Sometimes it's just as easy to retype something if it's quite small and then hit enter. And so go ahead and pause the video now, get this data entered in exactly matching my sample here. Your data set should now look like this. We learned, and you should have practiced by now, different ways to get around your spreadsheet while you are entering data. We learned about using the mouse. We learned about using the tab key. So after you enter in a piece of data and you want to go to the right, use the tab key. When you want to enter the data and go down a row to the beginning column, you use the enter key to enter that data in. And at any point when your hands are on the keyboard, you can use the arrow keys, the 4 arrow keys, up, down, left, and right, to get around your spreadsheet to enter data or fix data. Just a few more tips about working with cells. So if you remember, we can single click on a cell and simply start typing again to type over that information. We could double click while pointing to a cell to get our cursor in there. And then I can use my mouse, or I could even use my arrow keys once I'm inside that cell like that to manipulate the data. Okay. I could also come up to the formula bar here and I could click in here to edit that data. And one other way I can get inside there is I can double click on a cell and I can point. This is just like in a word processing program. I could point to a single word and double click while pointing to that word to be able to change that text. When you want to work with a range of cells, you point to the first cell. So here I'm pointing to A1, click, hold down my mouse, and drag across. So I've just selected A1 through D1, and that is shown to you in the formula bar or the cell range area, A1 colon D1. And I'll do a simple formatting here, like make these bold, and you may recognize this B up on your toolbar for bold. I'm not going to format this next section, but just to show you another way to select an even larger range, you click on the first cell and you drag across and down, or down and across, or at an angle, until you get to the far bottom right and let go. And now you can go ahead and choose a font or a style or otherwise do something with that range of cells. One additional data selection technique is really helpful. When you want to select an entire column, you could click right on the column letter. So if you click on B, you've selected all of column B, infinitely down. You can select multiple columns by clicking on the column letter and dragging across columns. And likewise, you could do the same with rows. So I could click on row 2 to select all of row 2, or I could click on row 2 and drag down to row 8 to select all of those rows. So if you have an extensive amount of data going off your visual screen, But like we said earlier, if it's a smaller set, you can simply click in the first cell and drag down and over. So here I'll do that again, just like we did before, and I'll do one other thing. I'll change the point size. I'll increase it by 1, and I'll click on my column headings, A1 over through D1, and I'll increase that font size as well up to 11. So we're doing a little bit of formatting here just to get the idea of selecting ranges of cells and manipulating them to some degree. So your column headings should be 11 font size and bold, and your data should be 11 point size. Before we go much further, let's name our spreadsheet. Right now it says Untitled Spreadsheet. When I click up there in that area, it gets my cursor in there. So I'm going to just select all of that Untitled Spreadsheet, hit backspace, and give this a name. Store Sales. And you can hit enter or click somewhere on your spreadsheet. And now we're going to do just a little bit of copy and paste, and it's a little bit of a made up example, but maybe we want to have our item names off to the right over here so that when we're glancing at total sales, it's easier to see. So I can copy and paste these all in one step. So it's not that different than in a word processing program. You click on the first cell and drag down. We've learned how to do that. And you can right click on this, or if you like using the keyboard shortcuts, Control C. So I can right click and copy. And in a spreadsheet program, you just have to click in the first cell. So I'm going to click in E2 and right click and paste. And again, you can use your keyboard shortcuts, Control C and Control V if you like to do that. Notice when we right clicked here to paste, that not only is there a paste command, and there's your shortcut, Control V, but there's a paste special command. And this is really important in spreadsheets because you can choose to paste the value only if you're working with numbers. You can choose to paste the formatting only, the formulas, and so forth. So there's a lot of different choices here. And later on in the workshop, we might get into aspects of pasting in the value only. In any spreadsheet program, it's important to understand that there are different data types. And so, for instance, when we type in words, we have just a basic text data type. When we type in numbers, we have a number data type. And we have a special number type that's when we enter in a dollar amount and we want decimals to show up there. This is important for several reasons. One is for if you want to create calculations. Obviously, the information needs to be numbers if you're going to create calculations, and you will get an error message if you accidentally have something in as text. The other reason is for formatting purposes. So numbers can be formatted with decimal places. Here we already have decimal places, and we might want to format it with dollar signs and so forth. Some examples of entering data incorrectly would be to type text and then leave some spaces and then put a number and think that you're going to be able to manipulate that as numeric. So that cell is recognized as text, not as numeric. And one other thing, if I put a space in front of a number, so space 57 and enter, that information will be recognized as text as well. Let's do a little bit of quick formatting with some of our numbers. First, I'll go ahead and I'll delete this practice data here. I'll just click in there. I'll hit delete on my keyboard, and that deletes all of the data. Not my backspace, just my delete key. So I'm going to go ahead and select my dollar amounts from $2.99 down to $5.25. and we have some shortcut buttons on our toolbar. Notice we have a dollar sign and it says format as currency. So I go ahead and do that, and I have dollar signs put in there. My decimal points are just fine the way they are, but you can also kind of increase and decrease these decimal points. So if you just want that to round to whole numbers, or put some decimal places in there, or even more decimal places. So, and I'll just move it back to the 2 decimal places. Before I go any further, a word about your toolbar buttons here. We all may have slightly different views from each other depending on the size of your screen, how much you're zoomed in, etc. Please note that at the end of the toolbar, there's 3 dots, and that means more. So I have more toolbar buttons available. So when I click that, they just show up below. So there's more formatting and more spreadsheet buttons below. When I click that more button, they go away. We're going to get some practice with what's called the Autofill command. To do so, I'm going to click on the word pen in E2. The little round button on the bottom right of a cell is known as the Autofill button. To use it, move your mouse over onto that, and you can see that your mouse pointer changes to sort of a cross of lines. And when you click on that round button and hold it and drag in a direction, so in this case, I'm dragging to the right into F2 and then into G2, and I let go, what happens? It's the same as a copy paste, but it's a lot less clicking and fewer commands. I'll undo that because we're just practicing here. Another way this could work is I could select a range of cells, and then the round button appears at the bottom of the range of cells. And so when I click and drag that over to the right, the whole range of cells copies and pastes. Again, I'll undo this. And yet another way is typically when I want to use this, I'm typing in something. Let's say I'm just going to put the word monthly here because this is the monthly sales. And I hit enter. And I want that word to appear down that entire column. I could do a copy and then select the range and paste, or I could grab the autofill handle and drag it down. However, be aware that the autofill command it's very powerful, and it takes a little while to get used to. But when you enter in a word that or number that sort of might be sequential, like here I enter the word March. And if I want March to appear all the way down this, I could copy and paste the word March. But when you autofill the word March, let's see what happens. Oh, look, we have April, May, June, July. So the autofill command is incredibly powerful when you really do want months or numbers or days of the week to appear sequentially without you having to type it. It can be very useful and very powerful for you to use that. And for now, I don't really want these columns of data here, so I'll just undo. I like to use Control Z, and I'll just undo far enough. Something neat that you can do in Google Sheets, like you can do in most programs today, is make anything on your document a hyperlink to something else. So this could be an interesting thing to do right here on these items next to our total sales. So let's say I wanted to hyperlink pen to an item on the internet. So I'll click on that cell, and there's 2 ways that you can get there. You can go to the insert menu and choose the link command. Notice there's a shortcut there as well. If you end up doing a lot of adding of hyperlinks, you might take advantage of Control K. And then the other way would be, let me just click back, is to go to your toolbar, and it is a little further on my toolbar, so I do have to click more, and you see that insert link command right there. And after you click that, you could type, or better yet, you could copy and paste from the other web page the entire hyperlink. Now we are getting into the topic of creating formulas and functions. As you know, we entered in our quantity sold for all of our items and our cost per item. And we held off waiting to put a formula in here for total sales so that this automatically calculates the quantity sold times the cost per item. So I will demonstrate this now, and you should pay attention, and then you'll pause and you'll be able to create it yourself. So this is what it looks like. I'll click in cell D2, and to start a formula, we type in the equal sign. And notice that it comes up with a little bit of a suggestion. Just below my cursor there, it says B2 times C2. That asterisk is the multiplication symbol. And it even shows the result if I was to go ahead and enter this in. In fact, I'll go ahead and hit enter, and it puts that result in there. But please look up on the formula bar and you can see that it says equal B2 asterisk C2. So what's really inside cell D2 is not this number, but it's this formula. And so in fact, if you go ahead and if you updated the quantity sold to 58, your total sales will automatically recalculate. In case the suggested formula is not what you want, I'll demonstrate now how you would do it from scratch. So I'm clicking in the next cell, D3. I start with the equal sign, and I can point to the first cell that I want to be in my formula, so B3. And I could type in the asterisk, so it's Shift 8. And I could click in the next cell in my formula, C3. So it's populating that formula for me as I'm clicking in the cells. So I created this formula now, equal B3 asterisk C3. No spaces in there, nothing extra. And I hit enter, and it calculates for me. And by the way, now notice it wants to suggest to autofill that formula all the way down. And I can go ahead and do that. And then we're going to back this up and try it a few different ways. So I'll click the check mark. So now, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and start with the total sales for pens and get that formula in there and try it a few different ways, typing from scratch. If it suggests to autofill, go ahead and do that. If it doesn't suggest, you can click this round button, if you remember, and drag it down yourself to autofill. So go ahead and get that formula in all of these cells. What you should notice when you click in each of these totals areas, so I have the B2 times C2, and as I go down, it's B3, and whether you copied and pasted or auto-filled, you should see that all the references to the row number change. So 5 changes to 6, changes to 7 appropriately. So I'm going to undo some of this just to kind of start over again. So if I copied this formula, and I'm going to use my shortcut Control-C, and I paste it in here, Control-V, I see that all the references to row 2 changed to row 3. So that's interesting. It does not copy exactly. So instead of this saying B2 times C2, it changed from 2s to 3s. So this is part of the power of the spreadsheet program. When you copy a formula that does a calculation down a set of rows or across a set of columns, it knows to change that referencing to that next row or column. And I'll go ahead and I'll use the Autofill button to quickly copy and paste that back down my row. When creating basic formulas, for addition, you use the plus. For subtraction, you use the dash. For multiplication, you use the asterisk, which is Shift 8 on your keyboard. And for division, you use the slash, which may be on the same key as your question mark on your keyboard. So these are the 4 important symbols that you use when creating mathematical formulas. You can even practice this by just typing formulas with numbers instead of cells. So here I'm going to type equal 3 plus 3 minus 1 and hit enter. And I see that the result is 5, and I'll arrow back up and look up in my formula bar to see what I typed, 3 plus 3 minus 1. And did I expect it to be 5? Yes, I did. So these are different ways you can practice. I'll click in another cell and equal 4 times 2, enter, and it's 8. Again, I'm demonstrating this with numbers instead of cells just to make it easier and to give you some practice. And in a moment, you'll pause the video and get some practice with this. So here's a more compound formula. Equal 5 plus 2 times 3. Enter. And I'll arrow back up to look again what is in there. Did you expect 21 to appear as the result or 11 to appear as the result? Well, you have to understand the order of operations in mathematics. And the orders of operations say that multiplication and division occur first before addition and subtraction from left to right. So when I look at my formula from left to right, I have 5 plus 2 times 3. So the multiplication has to occur before the addition. So 2 times 3 occurs first. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 5 is 11. So that's the order of operations. So no matter where in the formula the multiplication or division might occur, they will occur before any addition or subtraction. Here's another example. Equal 5 plus 3 divided by 4. I'll click on that cell so I could see the formula up on the formula bar. And I see that 3 divided by 4 occurred first. So it's 5 plus 3 divided by 4 is in fact 5 3/4, which is 5.75. The order of operations rule in mathematics also says that if we put parentheses inside of our formula, we can force certain things to take place in a different order than the normal order of operations. So if I wanted the 5 plus 3 to take place first, I could put parentheses around the 5 plus 3. So now I have that this cell will equal to 5 plus 3 divided by 4. So that would be 8 divided by 4. So I'm expecting it to be 2. In just a moment, we'll have you pause the video to practice typing out mathematical formulas. So you can try different things like I have here. 3 plus 3 minus 1. Remember to start with the equal sign. Do some multiplication. Do some compound formulas where you're mixing and matching addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And notice the order of operations and add parentheses when you want to force your own order instead of the normal order of operations. So go ahead now, pause the video and take a few minutes to practice creating mathematical formulas. I'm going to go ahead and delete the data in these cells so I can just highlight those, hit the delete key on my keyboard, and it all goes away. Those were there just for practice. One more practice formula, not real for this example that we're creating here, but just to show you, we'll do some basic formulas using the cell references this time instead of typing in numbers. So let's just say over here, I want to work backwards and find out my quantity sold by doing some division. So I always start with an equal sign, and I'm going to click on my total sales here, and I'll hit slash for division, and I'll click on my cost per item, and I'll hit enter. And it comes out to 25, which matches. Okay, so I'll just click in there so you could see that formula equal D8 slash C8, which is divide. So it works just like it does with the raw numbers, but I'm using cells in this case. And again, this formula is not needed over here. It was just for practice. So I'll could undo that or just hit delete. So now we know that entering data, creating formulas is a very powerful feature in spreadsheets. Copying data, and in fact, copying formulas are all incredibly powerful, but there are some other exceptions that we have to be aware of. Here I'm going to create an example of a column, and maybe we'll call this discount. Maybe we were offering a sale. To demonstrate this, I've created a column and labeled it discount. And then in cell G1, I put 10%. Now I want to create a formula in this cell, F2, to calculate the discount on the total sales for pens, for instance. So I'll start with an equal sign. I'll click on the first cell, which is D2, and I'll type in my asterisk for multiplication, and I'll click on the discount percent, which is G1. So now I have equal D2 times G1, and I'll hit enter, and I've got $17.34, and that looks correct. So I've created a formula that shows the discount for pens from the total sales times this discount rate. So instead of putting that discount rate directly in my formula, I have it up here so that I could always change that discount number so that this can work with any discount amount. And so as you learned copying and pasting, we have something we have to be aware of here though. So now we're going to, I'll just do this for one cell instead of autofilling. I'll do copy and paste. Oh, I've got zeros. Why is that? Well, let me go look up at my formula. I'll look up here. It says D3 times G2. D3 times G2. Oh, when I copied the formula down one row, it changed the reference to all the row numbers by 1. So it changed the reference from this row number to this row number, and from this row number to this row number. Well, that's not what I want. When you're copying a formula down a set of rows and only one reference to the rows you want to change, but the other cell reference in the formula you don't want to change at all, we need to do something special. And this is called absolute cell referencing. I will undo the previous formulas that I created and copied. And I'll start over again, equal D2 times, and I'll visually select G1. But I'm going to use my arrow keys. I'm going to click up here in the formula bar, and in front of my G and in front of my 1, I'm going to put dollar signs. This is a special symbol, okay? So to be sure that no matter where I copy a formula that refers to a cell, and I don't want that cell reference to change at all, no matter where I copy my formula around my spreadsheet, I put a dollar sign in front of the row letter and in front of the, in front of the column letter and in front of the row number. This is called absolute cell referencing. I'm referring to that cell absolutely no matter where I copy it. So let me hit enter. Oh, and it suggests autofill, which I can go ahead and say okay. And if it doesn't do that for you and you copy and paste this formula down, or you autofill it yourself manually using the autofill button, that's fine. But I'll click in some of these and I'll see that the first cell row number changes, D3 changes to D4 to D5, but the reference to G1 stays the same. Now we're going to take a look at functions. So functions are similar to formulas in that they perform a calculation for you, and you always start with an equal sign because that cell is not going to have data typed into it, but it's going to be equal to something else. But a function is sort of like a very powerful formula. It performs parts of the mathematical expression for you. So for instance, we would like to have the total sales be totaled up at the bottom here. So sure, I could create a formula that adds this cell to this cell to this cell, but we'll use a function. And so I'll click in that cell, cell D9. I'll type the equal sign. Oh, and look, it actually suggests a formula for me. And that formula is a function, and it's called sum. So you can see it says equal sum, open parenthesis, D2 colon D8, which means D2 through D8. And it even shows the answer there. And I'll hit enter, and it performs that function for me. I'm going to undo that just to show you a few other things to know. So I could, while my cell pointer is in the cell where I want the function, I could come up and I could click the function button, or I could go to my insert menu and choose insert function. And at the top, you have some of the most commonly used functions. And then you can see there are many, many, many other functions. And they fall into different categories, financial and logical. And we'll get to some of these later in the course. But notice some of the most popular ones right at the top. So sum, and it puts the open parenthesis in, and it's waiting for me to select the range of data to sum. So I'll click in D2 and I'll drag down to D8. Make sure you stop with the raw data and don't keep going. So I'll let go. I could even just glance at that quickly, D2 through D8, and I'll hit enter. Now let's try another function. For cost per item, maybe we want the average cost per item to show up. So I'll start with my equal sign, and it's suggesting sum, but no, I don't want that. So I'll click up on my sum button and I'll put average. And now it's waiting for me to select the range because it has the open parentheses. So there's my function. It's equal, average, open parenthesis, C2 through C8, close parentheses. Enter. And I get my average. It looks sort of correct. I would have to use a calculator to really see if that was correct, but I can trust that that is correct. So now if you have not done so already, in a moment you can pause the video to enter in these formulas and functions. So for the discount, right, you have discount and 10%. You have equal D2 times $G $1. And then when you copy that down, that reference will stay the same. And then for our functions, we click down here immediately after the total sales. Don't skip a blank row. Go immediately after that and start typing equal. And the auto sum function should come up for you. If not, you can click on the functions button and click on sum. And then for the cost per item, we made that the average. So you could see that that's equal, average, C2, and you'll have to select C2 through C8. Go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and get all of these formulas and functions in. At this point, your spreadsheet should look like mine and should be made up of the raw data and some formulas and functions. If you do not have your spreadsheet up to this point, feel free to go ahead and download the practice file. And what you'll have to do is to get it into Google Sheets is to open up a new blank Google Sheet on your Google Drive and then import the practice file. Now we're at the point where we want to format our spreadsheet so that it looks nice and we can easily see certain sections. Please be aware that there is a menu called Format. And there's lots of things that you can do under the Format menu. A lot of these buttons are found on your main toolbar. And remember to press the three dots to get more formatting options, such as this one here called Alignment. So as we did once before, let's go ahead and format our column headings here by clicking on A1 and dragging through D1. And let's make that point size even larger. So I'm going to go up, let's say a couple of clicks till I get to 14. I'm going to select my items down the left side because I want them to stand out as well. I'll just increase that point size by 1, but I'll also go over to the text color and I'll change that text color to something pretty bright and colorful. You'll notice that due to the increased font size, some of these headers don't really fit anymore. So what you do is you can move your mouse in between the column letters, between B and C. And when you see that it changes to the two lines with the arrows pointing away, you can click and hold that down and drag that out to the right just a little bit. So you're just manually changing the width of the column by a little bit. Let's format some lines here above these totals. So when I click on cell C8 and drag over to, C9 and drag over to D9, I've selected both those cells. And there's a feature called borders. And it's this square with the small squares inside of it. And when you click on that, you get presented with little pictures of what your cells sort of look like, and you're picking one part of your cell that you want the borders to go on. So in this case, I want the top part of these cells. So you see this one here, top border of these two cells, and I'm going to change the style. So I clicked on it and it put a line in there, but now I want to change the style to this double lined border. Let's continue formatting this sheet a little bit more. This area over here, remember, it's more of a subsidiary part of our sheet. It's just this little special area dedicated to the discount. And notice the column width here is probably wider than necessary. So I can actually shrink down column F. I could shrink down column G significantly. Okay. I can even shrink down column E, get these to be just as tight as I want. And let's go ahead and select all of the data that's in E, F, and G. And let's use our fill color command. And I'm going to put like a light, gray in there. While that area is selected, I'm actually going to reduce my point size by just a little bit because remember, it's not a significant part of my spreadsheet. I'm reducing these column widths yet again. So there we have a little bit of formatting, and I'll click off of that so now you can see that. And it might be a little easier for someone to look across and see total sales. A special word about data alignment. So by default, when text is entered into the cells, that text is left aligned. And when numbers are entered in as numbers, they are right aligned, as are dollar amounts because they're numbers and they're right aligned. In fact, when you have decimals, they're decimal aligned. Okay, but you can override these if you need to. Sometimes a common thing might be to select your text items like I'm doing here. And I'll go to my alignment button, which I have to click the more. And the button is a left align. If I hit the drop down arrow, you could see I have left, center, and right. So let's say I want to center those items over there. Or for some reason, I want to center these numbers because I'm not really adding them up. It makes no sense to add them up. So it might be something to do there as well. In fact, it might be nice to center our column headings. I know some of them just fit, but as I drag across and select those, and I go to my alignment button, hit the little drop down arrow, and click the center, then all of my column headings center. And something I like to do sometimes is to underline these. And so I can go to my format menu, text, and I can choose underline or control U, which I'm starting to get used to remembering as a shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and highlight, well, you know what? I'll just select my total sales because that's the most important number. I'm going to increase that point size just so it stands out a little more. Sometimes after you go through the trouble of formatting part of your spreadsheet to get it to be just the way you want it and look the way you want it to, you want that formatting to be the same somewhere else in your spreadsheet. And so you're trying to copy that formatting. And I don't know if you remember earlier on, one way was using the copy and paste command. So notice if I select the word pen here, I right click and I choose copy and I select, let's say, pen all the way down through paperclip over here on the right. And I right click and I choose paste special. I could choose format only. So I'm copying and pasting the formatting only. And there you have it. Now, I don't want that, so I'll undo that. Another way you could accomplish pretty much the same thing is to click on the item that you are looking to get the same formatting for something else with, and use this sort of paint roller here. It's called Paint Format. This toolbar button just to the right of my print button. What happened is that has temporarily been copied, just the formatting. So now when I click somewhere else, like on the word discount, I've now copied the formatting over to that word discount. Again, it doesn't necessarily look appropriate there, so I'll just undo that. If you have not already formatted your spreadsheet to look like mine, go ahead and pause the video now and complete that formatting. A couple of more things about formatting. One thing is, let's just look at column A. let's just say for some reason we needed column A to be a little narrower. So I'll make column A pretty narrow, and a couple of my item names don't really show up anymore. So I could format this by selecting all of those cells, A2 through A8, and I'll go to the Format menu, and I'll choose Wrapping, and I'll come over to the right, and I'll choose Wrap. So now I've let those words wrap or word wrap within those boxes. And that's fine. However, now each of my columns, well, these three columns are now, these three rows are a little taller than these four rows at the beginning. And essentially, they're just twice as high based on the words in this first cell. So I could do some different things. I could click in here and I could hit, I'm going to undo that, but in effect, I'm going to do it a different way. Let's just say I actually want all of these column widths to be the same width, regardless of how much space the data takes up. So it looks like column B, quantity sold, appears to be the widest column. So what I could do is just click in a cell there, right, and right click and choose copy. And then I could click on A, B, C, and D across row 1, right click, choose paste special, column width only. So I copied and pasted the column width only across all four of those columns, so they are all identical. Now we're going to take a look at a few features that go a little beyond the data that you see on the screen, and one is called notes. So let's just say with our push pins, something we want to make note of that's very wordy and we don't want to take up space on this data spreadsheet. So I'll click in that cell, I'll right click, and near the bottom, I'll choose Insert Note. And now I can type my little message there. Changed to larger boxes. Maybe during this year or this month, the push pins changed to a larger box. And that's it. It remembers that information. I'll click elsewhere, and there's a little triangle in the upper right corner. When I hover over that item, I get to see those words. One of my favorite yet very simple features in Google Sheets is the checkbox. And so what I'm going to do is out here in H1, I'm going to create a new column heading, and we'll call it Met Quota. As in, did we meet the quota of sales for the month? I'll hit enter. And now I'm going to select all the cells below that next to my relevant data. I'm going to go to the insert menu. And a little more than halfway down is something called checkbox. And so what I've done, I'll click off of that. I've inserted these checkboxes, and that's all they are. It's for the user to go ahead and check. You click in to put a check in there. You could click it again to turn the check off. So it's a nice simple thing, as you can see. This can be used for all sorts of spreadsheets, even if there's not data calculations or numbers or total sales, a very simple checklist type thing. The last topic we'll cover in this video has to do with formatting, and it's called theme. So at any time, I could go to my format menu and choose theme, and I can scroll down here, and I'm going to try to select one that makes a significant difference in the look so you could see those changes. And I'm scrolling down, and I'll choose vintage. And you can see that the font style and the formatting throughout the entire spreadsheet changes. So sometimes, instead of going about formatting different parts of your spreadsheet, you might want to first check out a theme, and maybe it will do a significant amount of formatting for you. This is a wrap up of the Introduction to Google Sheets video, and these are the items that we covered and more. Quick review of some of the important items. Remember, go to your Google Drive, click the New button to start a blank new Google Sheet. At any time you're in Google Sheets, don't be afraid to use the Help menu. You can search the menus, or you could use Sheets Help to simply learn more about what you're trying to do. Navigating around the Google Sheets environment can be done by using the mouse, by using the Tab key. Remember, when you type in something in a cell and hit Tab, it enters that and moves the mouse pointer over to the right. As you're entering data and you hit the Enter key, your cell indicator will move down and over to the left, depending on where you started typing in your data. And at any time your hands are already on the keyboard, use those arrow keys to get around your spreadsheet instead of reaching for the mouse. The Paste Special command does things that the Paste command does not allow. You can paste in values only, or the formatting only, or even the column width only. Here's an example of a formula that we entered in. Equal B2 asterisk C2, and the asterisk is the multiplication. Here's another formula with a reference to an absolute cell reference. Right? When we copy that formula down to another cell, we don't want the reference to G1 to ever change. And for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, you use the plus, the minus, the asterisk, and the slash. Thank you so much for joining me. Please join us for our intermediate Google Sheets workshop and later our advanced Google Sheets workshop videos. Welcome to Learn Skills Daily, Google Sheets Intermediate. Hi, I'm Angelo Eurico. I'm a New York State certified teacher and administrator, and I'm a Google for Education certified trainer. This is Google Sheets Intermediate, and we'll be covering things like managing spreadsheets, creating charts, working with graphics, linking and protecting data, amongst other topics. With managing spreadsheets, you'll be looking at ways that you could rearrange your information by sorting it. We'll be looking at printing, which is a big part of working with spreadsheets. We'll be looking at creating charts. Creating a visual representation of your data is a very important and useful thing. We'll be working with graphics in other ways. And we'll be looking at different ways that you can link your spreadsheets. And more. Let's get started. If you were with us for the Introduction to Google Sheets video, then you may have created this file as we were building it, learning our skills. If not, you may download the practice file now. It's called Practice File Store Sales B. And this is what it looks like. If you were with us for the beginner video, Intro to Google Sheets, then you built this spreadsheet along with me as we were learning the skills. If not, then you may have downloaded the practice file as instructed. If you did download the file, please realize that that is an Excel file. And here are the steps to bring it into Google Sheets so you can continue working from this point along with us. I recommend you go to your Google Drive, you click on New, Google Sheets. You'll be in a blank, untitled spreadsheet. Then you'll go to File, Import. And after choosing Import, search your computer for that file that you downloaded. And then it will appear inside of your blank spreadsheet. And it should look like this. When working with spreadsheets, it can be particularly helpful to zoom in or zoom out when necessary. especially when working with finer points of data or when your spreadsheet gets to be quite large. So if you notice up on your toolbar, you'll see 100%, and that's the default zoom. But I can go ahead and click that drop down and jump up to 125%, and I can see this data a little better. Notice that that command is also found in the View menu under View Zoom. I'm going to change my zoom back to 100%. Please be aware that when you're working in most browsers like Google Chrome or other browsers, that to zoom the entire browser window, you can use the Control plus or Control minus. So when I press Control plus, my entire screen zooms in, including my menus and my toolbar buttons. So that's different than using the Google Sheets zoom where just the data zooms in. So I'll hit Control minus to zoom my browser back out. If you remember, when we built this spreadsheet, we were focusing on the items, the quantity sold, cost per item, and total sales. And then we realized we wanted this other section here with this discounted amount, okay? And we continue to build our spreadsheet as we think of things that we need. And then sometimes it might not really fit together the way that you want. So in Google Sheets, there are many sheets that you can have in one master document. So down on the bottom here, we have a sheet called Sheet 1, and that is the default main sheet. But I'm going to go ahead and hit plus to add a second sheet. And I'll click on the drop-down menu for Sheet 1 and click Rename. And I'll call that Sales. And I'll click on the drop-down for Sheet 2, or I could even double-click right there on the word Sheet 2 and call it Discount. So now I'm going to go ahead back to my main spreadsheet Sales, and I'm going to select this area, E1 down through G8. And you can see up here in the left, E1 through G8, that I actually did select that. And I'm going to move this over to this other tab. So after I've highlighted it all, I'll right click while pointing to that highlighted area, and I'll choose Cut. And it puts a little dotted line around there. Then I'll click on my Discount tab, and cell A1 is already chosen, but I'll point to it and right click and choose Paste. And now my data from the first spreadsheet has been pasted over here. And in fact, we can see that that data looks identical. And when I go over back to the Sales tab, I see that it's gone. Now I'm going to tidy up this area by deleting these columns. So to do that, I have to select the entire column. So I'll point to E, click, hold down, dragging over. So now I've selected all three of those columns. And while pointing to any one of those column headings, I'll right click and I can delete columns E through G. I'll repeat the instructions and you can pause the video and try this yourself. So if you remember, we highlighted, well, first we created the new tab down here by hitting plus. And then we renamed both of these tabs. And then we highlighted those three columns in that area. We right-clicked on it, cut, we went over to discount, and we pasted. Then we came over here and selected the three columns, right-clicked, and deleted. And now before you try this, if you remember from the first video how to copy the formatting from one cell over to another, go ahead and fix the formatting of the met quota to match the formatting of the other column headings. So go ahead, pause the video, and try all of that now. I'm going to copy the formatting from total sales over to met quota. So I'll point to total sales and just right click and choose copy. I'll point to met quota, right click and choose paste special, if you remember, and we'll choose format only. So paste special is a very cool command that lets you paste certain things and not the entire thing that you were copying. Excellent. We copied and pasted the formatting over, so our column headings all match. And one other quick note before we end this topic, I'm going to click down on the discount tab and I'll click in one of these cells. If you remember, we had this formula that calculated this percentage discount based on this cell right here. So when I click in B2, you could see above the formula on the formula bar. Well, it's changed a little bit. It says equals sales exclamation mark, and then it has D2 times absolute C1. Well, what it's doing is it knows that part of that formula is coming from the sales sheet, and it's timesing that by C1, the 10%. So you can have formulas that span across different tab sheets. A couple of more things that you can do with tabs. You can take a look at that drop-down menu there. Notice you can delete the tab, you can duplicate it, you can copy it to a brand new spreadsheet or this existing or another existing spreadsheet. You could rename the tab, you can change the color. I'll go ahead and do that. I could protect the sheet, hide it, and I could move it left along the line. I can also drag these left to right to order these tabs in a way that makes sense to me. So right now I'm going to go ahead and hide sheet. So it leaves this area. It doesn't mean that it's gone, and it's just possibly something that I don't need to ever look at again. And it just saves some room and some visual space. So to get that back, I will have to go to the View menu, and you'll see this line called Hidden Sheets. And I have the hidden sheet, and it says Show Discount. So I can now re-show that sheet tab. For the next skills, I'm going to go back to the main Sales tab. In a moment, we're going to look at how we can sort our data. But first, I'm going to do a couple of minor formatting things. I can see that some of my headers, based on my formatting, are a little tight in there. So I'm just going to increase these column widths, move my mouse pointer between the column headings B and C, and drag that over to the right the tiniest bit. Same thing over here between C and D, the tiniest bit, just so that that doesn't look as cramped. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, just for the sake of the training video, is to increase my zoom a little bit. I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can sort your data, and then you can pause the video and give it a try. So I'm going to go up to the Data menu, and when I scroll down to Sort Sheet, I could see there's two choices available to me. Sort Sheet by column E, A to Z, and column E, Z to A. That simply means in increasing order from lowest to highest, right? That's the normal kind of way that we mostly sort. But sometimes you want to sort the opposite, from highest to lowest, from letter Z down to letter A, right? So if I choose that first choice, and I don't want you to do this, you'll see that the reason that the command suggested to sort by column E, it was because my cell pointer was in column E at that time. And in fact, this wouldn't be a bad thing to sort by met quota. So I'll go ahead and I'll just choose the first choice, column E, A through Z. And look at what it did. It sorted my data by met quota. So my unmet quotas were at the top, and the met quotas filtered down to the bottom. Sometimes it can be more helpful and even much more powerful to first select your data that you want to sort. And one way to do that would be to start in A1, click and drag across and down all of the data. I don't want to sort my totals, so I'll just stop with my raw data with the sticky notes row. And then choose data, and notice you have sort sheet and it's defaulting to column A, which is the item name. So that's another way that I could sort this spreadsheet. Or I can now look at the sort range. Because I've highlighted a range of data, I can choose the same commands or go further to the advanced range sorting options. And this is important for you to know and for you to look at. And in fact, my data does have a header row. I have headers, I have titles there. So watch what happens. Instead of having to choose by column letters, I click on data has header row and I actually get the column headings. So it's a little easier to know what I'm dealing with here. Maybe it's total sales, maybe it's quantity sold. So I'll choose quantity sold and I'll want it to go from largest to smallest. So that would be Z to A. And I could even sort another column within that. So if I had a lot of data and I wanted to sort by multiple columns within other columns, but I'll leave it like that and I'll choose sort. And I could see that my data is sorted by total sales. I can see that my data is sorted by quantity sold from largest to smallest. So pencils and sticky notes are up at the top. Okay, so go ahead and give this a try yourself. So remember, you can have your cell pointer in a cell and choose data, sort sheet, and see what happens. You can always undo that, right? Control Z or use your undo button up on your toolbar. And another more advanced way would be to highlight all of your data starting in A1 all the way down to the last piece of raw data, not including your summary or your total items, and then choose data, sort range, advanced. Go ahead and pause the video and try sorting that now and get your data sorted by quantity sold from largest to smallest. Now we'll take a look at filtering your data. Filtering means you can take out some of the data from your view so that you could see particular data that you want to see. To set up the filters, I can go to the Data menu and choose Create a Filter. And this little button appears next to every column heading. I can also find this same menu on my toolbar. When I click more, I could see this little filter icon here. It's a toggle, so it's either on or off. And the way this works, I'll use item as an example. So I'll click on the little drop-down button that now appears with item. And there's a lot of things you can do. You can actually sort from here. So if you are planning on going back and forth with all of your sorting, instead of having to go back to the data menu, you can do that. But to actually filter, I come down here and these are all the values, right, that appear in that column. So what I can do is if I want to narrow down that view, I have to first hit clear. So all of those get cleared out. And now I can choose the one or more than one that I want to be part of my view. So let's say I choose paper clips and click OK. Now only paper clips appear in my view. All the other data is still there. It's just not in this filter. And I see that I have a special filter going on. So it may not seem that important with this small set of data we're working with in practice here, but if you can imagine that you have pages and pages of items and you want to narrow down that view, how useful this can be. So I can go back to my filter and I could select all 8 if I want to get everything back and click OK. a special note on filtering the checkbox areas because again, this is a really cool feature having the checkboxes. When I click the filter, okay, that checkbox is either considered true or false. So I'll clear it, and I'll want all my items that are true. That means that they are checked. So I'll click OK, and I have all of my items that met quota appearing before me. Okay. And I can get that back by selecting all three. And once again, I see all of my data. And if I don't need those filters there at all anymore, I can click the toolbar button to quickly remove that filter. Something very useful when having large spreadsheets. So imagine this data was much larger and went down many rows past what we can see right here. Okay, the ability to freeze these column headings so that as I scroll down, I can still see those column headings associated with my data. And so to do that, I go to the View menu and choose Freeze. And notice I can choose to freeze one row. In this case, that's all I need. And it puts this gray line under there. And so now as I scroll down, and I'm using the wheel on my mouse here to scroll down, imagine there was more data all the way down here in these rows. I can still see the column headings. Very, very useful. And I'll scroll back up. And this is true also for the columns as I scroll to the right. So I'll do View, Freeze, and notice I can freeze. In this case, I only need to freeze one column as well. This time to scroll to the right, I'll just click in cell F and I'll use my arrow keys. And you'll see, imagine I had many more columns of data associated with my items in my store. And as I go across, I'll be able to see all of these columns of data associated with these items. In fact, even here, it helps me to more easily see some of my data associated with my item names in my store. I'm going to go to my View menu and freeze no rows and View, freeze no columns. It's not necessary for our practice, but it's good for you to know. So at this time, if you have not already tried using the filter command by using this button, or by using the data filter command, or the view and freezing the columns and heading rows, go ahead and practice that now. Pause the video and practice the filter and the freeze. Now we'll take a look at printing your spreadsheet. I'll go to the File, Print command. You also have a toolbar button right on the toolbar. And let's notice a couple of things. So the first thing that I notice is that it's in landscape format, which is the paper is wide, right? And there's a second page. Oh, that's the note. Remember, that's the note that we had as part of the push pins, right? Okay, let's look over here at the right at the different options. So I'll point out just a few important things, not everything at this time. So it defaults to printing the current sheet. Okay, what's interesting is you can print just selected cells. So if you have a very large spreadsheet, but you highlighted only some of the cells, a particular range, then you would change this right away to selected cells, and you would just get that small portion of your spreadsheet printing. Very useful. You could change this to portrait, but a lot of times spreadsheets need to be landscape because we have a lot of columns of data, right? Scale is very important in spreadsheets. You could sort of try to fit this to, fit on the page and things of that nature. But also I want to point out margins, and this is very useful in a lot of other products as well. When I click on margins, we have normal margins. And a lot of times with spreadsheets, you're trying to squeeze a lot onto the printed page. So to get your smallest margins, you would choose narrow. And we're not going to notice a change on this spreadsheet because it fits with plenty of room to spare. But what you've done is you've said that there's only going to be a very narrow margin to the edge of the paper. That means you can fit more data up to that narrow margin instead of a wider margin. Okay, I'll scroll down a little bit here more, and I'll click on formatting. And notice that I have my grid lines printed here. I'll zoom in a little for you to see a little better there, okay? And that's fine. It's great for reading large amounts of data, but when I turn that off, you could see sometimes it can look a little nicer. So if you don't need the grid lines, you might want to print it without it, okay? And I could even turn off that notes. Instead of printing that notes page, I could turn that off and that second page goes away. Okay, and maybe just one more thing to look at here down at the bottom, headers and footers. There's lots of cool things you can put on your spreadsheet that were not part of the data. For instance, the workbook title. And so now the title of my Google Sheet, Store Sales, appears in the upper left. Okay, I can also do some of these other things. I'll go ahead and click Next in the upper right, and it moves on to the next screen where it's ready to print this. Just a couple of commands here in Google Sheets that are similar to commands in other programs like Docs and other programs that you may be familiar with. One is I'm going to go to the Edit menu and choose Find and Replace. Now, I use this a lot to look for things in my documents and in my spreadsheets. So as an example, I'll just use pad. For instance, I'll just type that in and hit enter, and quickly it finds pad in my spreadsheet. I know the data is small, we can see it's right there, but imagine this was several pages long. I would find that pretty quickly. And if I wanted to replace a piece of data all throughout my spreadsheet, I would also use this replace box here. Okay. I'm going to close that. Another command that is familiar to you is spell check. So I'll go to my tools menu and I can go down to spelling and choose spell check. And it lets me know over here on the right that there are no spelling suggestions at this time. We're going to look at ways that you can share your files. So if I go to the file menu and I go down, I can see that there's an email command. And I can choose to email this file and fill out this information here. So it saves a little bit of time. However, there are other ways that you can email the file after you've downloaded it, or you could share it because it is a Google Sheet, in fact, and we'll get to that in a moment. So I'll hit cancel, and I'll move down here, file, to the download command. So this is really important, I think, especially when you're working with Google products where someone else might not be. And so the first choice is Microsoft Excel, right? So that's an obvious one. If someone else needs this file, or you in fact need this file in Microsoft Excel, then this is the way to go, okay? I'll skip over and down to PDF. Really important. When you want to send this to someone else and they don't need to manipulate the data like you are manipulating it, they just need to be able to see the information and maybe even print it, then PDF is the way to go. I'll keep moving down. Another important file format for you to download is comma separated value. You'll know if and when you need to do such a thing. This is a common format for sharing data across software packages. So if this data needed to be imported into another software package for our sales information here, then comma separated value is the way to go. And that program would be able to read the comma separated value file and hopefully put the data that we have in our spreadsheet into the correct buckets in that database software program. So to reiterate and even demonstrate it, that the PDF version of this spreadsheet is the choice for you when sending to someone that you want them to be able to see this, or even print this. So when I choose PDF, look what happens. It goes to my print command, which is where I was before. And I don't know if you all noticed when we got to the next screen. So I'll go ahead and make sure this looks the way I want it to look. These were all the choices we chose earlier when we were getting ready to print this. And I can choose the export command up here, and it goes ahead and it downloads that file. And now you have the PDF version of the Google Sheet downloaded, in which case you can attach it to an email or do what you need with it at that point. The last part of this section is to look at sharing. This is a very powerful part of the Google platform. And with Google Docs and Google Sheets and slides, etc., the ability to share this, there are many ways that you can share it. You can give someone full editing rights so they can manipulate it just like you can. Or you can change that and give someone only view rights. So I can go to the File menu and choose Share. Or I could go up here to the upper right, and there's a big Share button up there. After clicking the Share button, you'll see a screen that looks like this. And what's great is that the default in any of the Google products is that your document is restricted. So even if you copy that link and gave it to someone else, no one can see it at this time because it is restricted. Only people with access can open with the link. You would have to add someone in the box there by their email address. And then be aware, because the default after you add a person is that they have editing rights. So if that's what you want, then that's fine. You can copy the link and you can click done, and then you can email the person the link. There's a lot of other ways to send the person access as well. But be aware, if you don't want them to have edit rights, then after you add them in, go ahead and change it from edit to view only, and then click done. Here's a look at that screen after you put the person's name in, and you can see on the right it defaults to editor. You'll want to hit that drop down and change that if you need to viewer, if in fact you do not want the person to edit your spreadsheet. You can see that it's also checked for notify people. So if you hit the send button now, it would send them an email and give them the access to the file, which is very useful and quick. However, an alternative is to turn off that checkbox and not notify them this way. Maybe you're not ready to notify them. Maybe you want to take the time and write a more thorough email, and then you can copy the link here and add it into the email and send it to them that way. Now we're going to take a look at creating charts. And I can go to the Insert menu, or I could go over to my toolbar. I have to hit More in this case, and I see this little icon that looks like a little chart, and that's called Insert Chart. And when I click on that, it attempts to create a chart by looking at my data, and it makes this suggestion of charting the quantity sold. Okay, so it shows all of my items and the quantity sold in what's called a pie chart. And in fact, I think it looks kind of good if that's what I was looking for. You'll notice that the chart editor opens up on the right-hand side. And notice that there's two tabs, sort of, a setup, and there's more commands inside of customize. And notice under setup, pie chart is the default. Notice the data range, A1 through B9. So that's items and quantities. So again, the program makes this assumption, and it was a pretty good assumption. And there are other settings here to pay attention to. Notice that I could change the chart type. There's many different chart types, and sometimes these make sense and sometimes they don't make sense. Let's see what happens when I choose a column chart. Well, that looks okay. I can see highest to lowest of my quantity sold. can go across to customize, and I can look at all these different aspects and change the wording and change the visual representation of my chart. I'm going to go back to setup, and I'm going to change this again to the suggested pie chart. Notice with my pie chart overlaying my spreadsheet, I could click on the plain area and drag it around. I could use my resize handles, right? You have these all around. If you grab one of the corner handles, click and drag, you could change the height and width and it will stay proportional. So the height and width will change proportionally. Notice that there's a little 3-dot menu here with some, bigger things that you can do to your chart. I could delete the chart. I could download the chart as an image file or as a PDF. Downloading it as an image file is a nice way to then be able to bring it into another program like Google Sheets. I could publish the chart. I could copy the chart and paste it into Google Sheets that way as well. I could move it to its own sheet. So I'll go ahead and do that. Watch this. Choose move it to its own sheet. And remember the tabs down at the bottom of my sheet? I now have this extra tab called Chart 1. We'll leave that chart there and I'll go back to my main sales tab and we'll look at charting some more. Let's say I wanted to chart total sales. That would give me a very different looking kind of chart because of my numbers in those columns. So if I want to chart the item and my total sales, I have to select two non-contiguous sets of ranges, right? They're not attached to each other. They're not continuous. So first I'll select my first range, and then I'll let go of my mouse and I'll hold the Control key on my keyboard. And then I'll select the second range. And then I'll let go of everything. So I have separate sections of ranges on my spreadsheet. By the way, this can be done for if you're trying to manipulate the data in some other way, like formatting with font and point size and things of that nature. So I was holding down my Control key while I was selecting different ranges. So while those are selected, I can click on my Insert Chart command, and the default is total sales versus item. Well, that's fine. That's not bad, but I did like the pie chart. So let me go ahead over to chart type over here and change that to pie chart. It is one of the suggested, but not the first suggested. I'll click the second one there, pie chart. Aha. So now I have my total sales, my items all graphed as a pie chart. And I'll click on my pie chart here, and I'll go ahead and click the 3 dots, and I'll move it to its own sheet as well. Why don't I go ahead and name these tabs down here? So I'll double click on this chart of total sales, and I'll double click on this one and chart of quantity sold, and I'll hit enter, and I'll move these tabs. I can click and drag these to the end of my tabs area here. And I'll click back on total sales. So go ahead and pause the video and give it a try creating charts. And remember, no matter where you are, you could start the first chart and the program will attempt to suggest something meaningful. But then if you want to select particular data to chart, you can click and drag across it, or to select non-contiguous areas, click and drag across the first area, then hold down your Control key and click and drag across the second area, and then choose the Insert Chart button. Pause the video now and give inserting charts a try. Now that you've given creating charts a try, I'll touch on just a few additional points. And to do so, I'll jump over to my chart of total sales. What's nice when you put the chart in its own tab here is that these commands appear right for you at the top here. Copy, edit, publish, download, and delete. Okay, also, the other features that you may want to be able to edit, if you just point to a plain area on your chart and you right-click, you get all of your edit commands available here as well. So you can quickly jump to one of these areas if you know what you're trying to edit. And also know that the Edit Chart button up at the top that was provided for you opens up that panel on the right with the setup and the customize, which you saw originally when you created a chart. So I'm just going to go down in the pie, the chart type area where it says pie chart. Not only do you have the suggested, but you can see the many different choices: line and area and column and bar and pie. And all of these make sense depending on the type of data that you're working with and what you're trying to show. Quite frankly, you can show a lot of different aspects of your data depending on the purpose. And down in other, there's some really neat different charts to use here. This one right here in the middle is called scorecard chart. And what's neat is it just makes a nice big graphic of the high item in your chart. While we're here, I'll touch on one other feature, which is actually true for other aspects of Google Sheets, and in fact, a lot of the Google products in general. So here we have a command called Publish Chart. And what happens is that the document sort of gets published to the web after I hit this button. And then you will be provided with a link, which you could share with someone, or you could put the link on your website or in an email, things of that nature. You can also choose embed, in which case you'll get an embedded code. And then this image here, this chart or image, could get embedded on another website type of tool. I will not publish this right now, so I'll hit close and I'll click on the bottom to my last tab, chart of quantity sold, just to talk about the last final things here. As you point to an area specifically on your chart and you right click, you'll be presented with what looks like the same menu items as when we right clicked on the plain part of our chart. However, sometimes there are very specific things that you could do at this point in time, like I right-clicked on a particular pie slice, so now there's a command called Format Pie Slice, and I can change that color. So I'll choose a different color here. All right, so when you point to a particular part of your chart and right-click on it, you'll get presented with something specific to that area. You can get very granular with how you can control and modify the look of your charts. So just a few things to continue down here with this pie slice. Notice distance from center. I can do things like chunk this pie piece out like that. Right? I can go down to the next area, chart and axis title. Notice I have my chart title and I can manipulate the font of that title. Legend is pretty important in a chart. It's how you identify the data in the chart. And if you noticed a little earlier, we had the words with lines pointing to the sections. And when I broke this piece of pie out, it changed to a more traditional legend, which is auto positioned, but I could change that. Let's say if I move that over to the right, now my legend appears on the right. So before we move on to our next topic, take this opportunity to do some practice. And it doesn't matter what your chart ends up looking like for the purpose of our workshop here. But I would say that please go ahead and see that you have the 2 tabs down at the bottom with each of these 2 charts, and practice with all of the features you can find in the setup menu and in the customize menu off to the right, and even with some of these menu items across the top. So pause the video now and take some time to practice creating and manipulating charts. Now we're going to look at how you can insert other types of graphics, just like you can in, say, a word processing or a spreadsheet or a slideshow program. So one is I could go to the Insert menu and choose Image. And in a spreadsheet program, it's a little different. It wants to know if you want to insert it into a cell or over the cells. I'll choose over the cells, which gives me a little more control. And I could insert this image from anywhere. Maybe I have a photo. Maybe I want to browse my computer. For now, I'll go over to Google Images and I'll search for stationery. And I'll choose a nice image here that I see of stationery. And just like with your other programs, when I click on this image, I can resize it. If I grab the corner handle, I'll be able to resize it proportionally. If I grab one of the side handles, I'll be changing it disproportionately, right? So I'm distorting it. So please be aware of that. And this is true in most programs on computers. I'll undo that, Control Z, to get the proportions correct again. And I'll just shrink the size down using one of the corner handles. So maybe I want this somewhere on my spreadsheet to make it look nicer. Notice, like with a graph, there's a little 3-dot menu in the upper right corner of things you can do with this. So lots of different things. Alt text is something that's required if this was to be on a website. It's the text that appears for an image for accessibility purposes. A completely other type of graphic that you can add onto your spreadsheet is a drawing. So image, drawing. If you don't know, Google Drawings is its own program and has many more commands than what you see available here. But drawing is also a piece of most of the Google products. Gives you the ability to put in any kind of graphic that you feel like creating from scratch. It's not so much of a free form drawing tool with like a pencil where you can scribble and draw curvy lines, but it is a tool that helps you make straight lines or shapes very easily. So it'll take me just a second here to click and choose a shape, maybe this rectangle with the rounded edges. And now some more buttons become available, like the fill color that I could change, and the border weight, so I can add a border around that. I could insert text somewhere on my drawing. It's also great at drawing different kinds of lines with arrows and things like that. And when I'm ready, in the upper right, I could hit Save and Close. And now I've just created this image. If I click on it and get that handle there, I can move this around just like any other image. And I created this from scratch. So for purposes of moving forward in this training, I'm just going to manipulate these a little bit to get them to stay, but not take up so much space. I'll resize them both. And maybe this has something to do with my marketing material or things of that nature. So I'll leave them there. So go ahead and pause the video and practice using your insert command to insert images from different places or to create drawings. And I tell you, that drawing tool is really useful. And once you know how to use it here, you'll know how to use it in the other Google products or in the drawings tool that stands alone. Now we're going to get into linking data and linking spreadsheets. As you can see, I've added a little bit to my spreadsheet. I shrunk down the width of column F, added some gray, and added these two little headers, discount info and additional sales. So we're going to create some links. So I'm going to go into this cell right below discount info. I'm going to right click and choose insert link. Now this is a command that is available throughout the Google products, and it just works a little differently depending on where you are. And in Google Sheets, it has some different functionality. So first it asks me for some text that I might want to put in there. So I'll just put discount, and I'm going to click in the link area here where I need to put in the links. And I'll go down and I'll choose sheets and named ranges. I'll just look for some areas within this spreadsheet workbook where I have these other sheets, which are the tabs across the bottom. Again, because this is an example, we only have 4 tabs here, but you could have dozens of tabs across here. And so by doing what we're doing, creating a link to this discount tab, we've saved a lot of time for the person that needs to use this. So I'll click elsewhere so you could see that a little clearer. We have this little header, and we have this clickable link here, which takes us to the discount tab or the discount sheet. I'll click back on sales, which is our main tab, and we'll do something a little differently here for additional sales. I'll click in the box just below that, and I'll right click, and I'll choose insert link. And for text, I'll just say catalog. And this time, though, it's a different spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do is go to the upper left to my tab for my Google Drive. And I'm going to go find this other Google Sheet that I have, or in this case, it's a Microsoft Excel sheet. And there's a lot of ways I can get that link to that sheet. And one way is to just point to the file, right-click, go to Share, and choose Copy Link. Okay, you can also do that by clicking up here or by clicking on the 3-dot menu on the right over here. So I've copied that link. I'll go back here and I'll click and I'll right click where it says paste a link. And in fact, I'll paste the link and I'll click apply. And you see that nice thumbnail view. And I know that that's the correct spreadsheet, which I could click on it and it would go directly to that completely separate spreadsheet. And this could be any other thing. This could be a link to a Google Doc or a link to a slideshow or a PDF or an image file. So go ahead and pause the video and try this out. Get your spreadsheet to start to look like mine with these additions. And then go ahead in G2 and then in G5 and add the link to the local sheet and add the link to really could be anything else on your Google Drive if you want, just like I got that link from my file on my Google Drive. Okay, pause the video now and practice that. The idea of protecting some of our data on our sheet is just as important as ever, especially now with the ability to easily share this with colleagues. And so there are some times when you want to be able to share this, have multiple people contributing to this, but protect some cells from being edited by others. So for instance, for all of our items, I might like to have my colleague enter in the quantity sold. But there's no reason for them to change the cost per item, the formula that I have in the total sales column, or the met quota information. So I will select, click, and drag across and down. I'll choose the data menu, protect sheets and ranges. And you'll see over on the right that sales sheet C2 through E8 has been selected. And I could give this a little bit of a nickname like management information or cost and quota, whatever have you. And then I can go ahead and set permissions. And notice I even have some choices here, restrict who can edit this range, only you, which is me. So in this case, that's what I want. And I'll click done. And so now, even though I can share this with colleagues and my colleagues can manipulate the images and the charts, and specifically, I want them to be able to input the quantity sold for that month. If they were looking at this and they tried clicking in these cells, they would not be able to edit the cost per item and total sales, etc. This is a very powerful and useful feature in this day and age of being able to easily share on our Google Drive and collaborate with others. You might have reason to protect an entire sheet or the majority of a sheet or sheets within this entire workbook. So since I've already started some protection, I could use this button here, add a sheet or range. And I can bump over to the right to this tab called sheet. And notice I have the option to choose any one of the sheets. Okay, so maybe the discount page, set permissions, only me, and more. Another sheet. I'll leave it in sales, and maybe I could do accept certain cells, and this time give a range of cells that I do want to allow others to manipulate. So that's sort of the opposite way of locking out a range of cells. So now pause the video so you can practice with protecting sheets and ranges. Remember, go to the data menu and choose protect sheets and ranges, and you'll get both options on the side to protect either ranges or entire sheets. One of the true benefits of working with the Google products like Google Sheets is that different versions of your document get saved along the way. This is incredibly helpful, especially when you're collaborating with others and other people have access to the sheet, especially editing access. And so if somewhere along the way, part of the information gets damaged, you have the ability to recover that information. Likewise, if certain people are responsible for certain parts of the work, you can also see who did which part of the editing and which part of the inputting of all of the work. To see these different versions, we will look at the version history. You can always find it in the File menu near the bottom, Version History. See Version History. Or way up here in the upper right, it gets its own little button, this little sort of clock-looking thing. And when I click on that, on the right, I see my history of all the versions that were saved along the way. So if somewhere in the last hour or two, someone edited this and made a mistake, I can go here and I can go back to a previous version. So I can look at those previous versions first. So I can click back here to an earlier version from today and see what was there before the information was accidentally deleted, or simply what did it look like before it was edited. If necessary, Notice the big blue button, restore this version. I could restore the file, in other words, change the spreadsheet back to having it look like this. So restore this previously saved version if necessary. If you or someone needs to use a screen reader to understand the data in the spreadsheet and manipulate it, you would go to the Tools menu and down to Accessibility. And there are a few options here, and first you would turn on screen reader support, and then you have some sub-options underneath that. We're going to take a look at something called named ranges. So I've already typed in here the word average. Let's say we want the average of the quantity sold. Well, we know that we could put a formula in there using a function similar to the way we did cost per item. But let's say this is a common range, this B2 through B8. And again, suppose this was a very long data sheet, and we use this range a lot in different formulas that we're trying to compute all kinds of different information on. So I go to the Format menu. I go to the Data menu and choose Named Ranges. And there you see, because I highlighted it in advance, I have my range on the sales sheet B2 through B8. And it's already highlighting this sample name. I'll give it a more meaningful name. I'll just call it quantity. And I'll click Done. So I've simply named that range, and it could have been a much bigger range and so forth. So an example of how this might be used is when you're creating a formula or a function. In this case, I'll do the function, and I know it's called average. So I'll start my function with equal, and then start typing the word average, open parentheses. And I know that normally I can go and select this range. But if it's a very long range that takes many, many screens, it can be sometimes difficult to select. But I know that that range of data is called quantity. So instead of putting the range of cells, I just put the word quantity, close parentheses. So that's the name of the range. And you can see that it highlights the range for me. So I can sort of verify with my eyes that that's correct. And I'll press enter. And now I have that average in there, which is 76 in this case. This is a wrap-up of the Google Sheets Intermediate Workshop, where we covered these and more topics. As a quick review, this is what we ended up producing. We manipulated our data. We did a lot of formatting. We sorted our data. We added checkboxes. We added links to other spreadsheets. We added graphics. We created formulas and functions. We sorted data. Remember to go to the data sort range command, where you'll find advanced range sorting options if you pre-selected the range of data that you wanted to sort, like you see here in the background where I highlighted from the word item all the way down to this last piece of data before choosing this menu command. A few quick tips with printing. If you remember, we looked at margins and we talked about how narrow margins are very useful for large spreadsheets. In formatting, you can find a place to add headers and footers. We created charts. Here's a pie chart. Remember, to select non-contiguous ranges of cells, hold the Control key down on your keyboard. This is for Windows users. It might be different for a Mac. Use the Insert Chart button on your toolbar or the Insert Chart menu command to start inserting a chart. The Drawings tool is something that's available throughout all of the Google products and is very useful, interesting, and powerful. You can go to the Insert menu and choose Drawings. And last but not least, sharing is a very powerful and common feature of the Google platform. remember to set the sharing rights after you add a person. For instance, you might want to change it from editor to viewer on occasion. The default is editor, so please do be careful. Thank you. Please join us for the advanced Google video. Welcome to Learn Skills Daily, Google Sheets Advanced. Hi, I'm Angelo Eurico. I'm a New York State certified teacher and administrator, and I'm a Google for Education certified trainer. In this workshop, Google Sheets Advanced, we'll be covering topics such as advanced functions, pivot tables, macros, forms, and more. Advanced functions such as logical functions, lookup functions, text functions, and date functions are just some that we'll be covering. Here's an example of VLOOKUP. Pivot tables allow you to look at your data in many meaningful ways. Macros let you record a set of commands that you perform often, such as sorting by different columns. Google Forms is a product unto itself. You can collect information, perform surveys, etc. And the wonderful thing is that the data is collected in a spreadsheet. We'll be covering more topics as well. Let's get started. Here's a view of the exercise file that we'll be starting with for this workshop. This is where we left off from the first two videos, and we built this as we went along. On the bottom of the screen, you can see the different tabs of sheets that we developed, including two that include charts. The exercise file is called Practice File Store Sales C. You could download the file, then import it into Google Sheets, or you could click on the link to make a copy, and then you will have your own copy of this sheet on your Google Drive. We're now going to begin looking at advanced functions. And the first set of advanced functions fall into the category called logical. So what do we mean by a logical function or a logical statement? Well, let's look at our information and just talk about what it means to make a logical statement. For instance, maybe I want to look at the quantity sold column and ask the question, the logical statement of, if quantity sold is greater than 100, give a gold star. Or maybe my logical statement might be, if total sales is greater than 100, place 2 red dollar signs to signify significant sales. These are just some examples of logical statements, and now we'll get into building these functions. Before we get started creating our functions, I'm going to insert a column here in front of G. So I'll go and click on the letter G. I'll point to the letter G and right click, and I'll insert one column on the left. So now I have this column available here. And so I'm going to go into G2, and this is where I'm going to create my first function, and then I'll be able to copy it down. As we move through creating these advanced functions, I might just type the name of the function in. But just so you know, we can go up to that Insert Function button on the toolbar, and I can see all of my functions by category. So there's an entire category called Logical, and this is the section we're on right now. So I'm going to choose the first logical function called AND. The way AND works is that I could put as many statements inside of these parentheses as I want, and all of those statements would have to be true, and then the result in this cell would be true. So here's one example. Maybe I want to say that quantity sold, so I click there and it puts B2 for me, is greater than 100, comma, space, total sales is greater than 200. So my statement is B2 is greater than 100 and D2 is greater than 200. So quantity sold is greater than 100 and total sales is greater than 200. I'll hit enter. And my answer is false because that is not true. Quantity sold is greater, but total sales is not. So now I'll click back on this cell and I'll use my autofill button, that little button in the bottom right, drag down, and that's the same as a copy paste. And you'll see that we have one true line there. Right here, sticky notes fulfills both statements, so it gets a true. So you might be thinking, well, why would I want to do this? Well, realize that this function can be embedded inside of other functions, or we can then turn around and do things with the results here. So we could even conditionally format this column here so that when it equals true, we highlight that cell in yellow, or we highlight the whole row in yellow. So sticky notes jumps out at us anytime one of our items goes over that threshold of quantity sold and total sales. Something happens, like it highlights in yellow or it stands out in some way. A very similar function is called OR. So I'll click in the first cell with our function, and I'm just going to manually edit it since the majority of it is the way I want. And just to demonstrate here, I'm going to get rid of the A and D, and I'm going to put in OR. And so now only one of those two statements have to be true for this to become true. And so what would you expect? That I would expect that there'll be more trues appearing down the column because only one of the two have to be above the threshold. So I'll repeat this copy again. So I have to click back on G2 and I'm going to copy and paste or autofill this function all the way down this column. And now I have even more trues than I have falses going down here because only one or the other statement has to be true. Now we're going to work with the if function. So I'll insert another column here and I'll click in H2. I'll start my function with an equal sign, if, open parentheses, and I get a little explanation of what's going on here so you can take a look at this and learn as you're using these functions. So there are three parts inside that parentheses, all explained. So the logical expression is very similar to what we just did in G with the and. That's a logical expression and it returns either true or false. But here I'll just create a new one from scratch, similar to what we were doing before with total sales. So I'll say if total sales, so I'll click in D2. If D2 is greater than 200, comma, space, I want to put a special word in there. So instead of true or false, I have to put open parentheses if I want to have text appear in this cell. So I'll put wow, close quotations. And I don't have to put anything after this, but if I don't, then the word false might appear in my box. So maybe I don't want to have false. So I'll put a comma and I'll put the last part if the value is false. And you could see how this help box is moving along. It's letting me know where I am. Right now I'm at value if false. So what do I want to appear in the cell if the value is false? And I'll put open quotes and I'll actually put a space and closed quotes. So I want nothing really. I want a space to appear in there, and shift 0 is my closed parentheses. And now I have a complete function there. I've zoomed in so that you could see this a little closer. I have if open parentheses D2 is greater than 200, comma, space, wow in parentheses, comma, space, and then one space inside of the quotations. And now I'll enter that formula in. It suggests the autofill down the column, and I'll go ahead and approve that, check that, and I'll just click off of there. And you see that I have wow appearing in the places where total sales is greater than 200 in this case. Now I'll have you practice with the and the if statements. I will zoom in on the two functions first, and then you can pause the video appropriately to practice each of those. Here is the or statement that we put. There are the two statements for you to practice. In column G, we put the or statement, and in column H, we put the if statement. Notice capitals is not required for the function. As you see, if is in lowercase. Go ahead, pause the video now and practice getting those formulas, functions in. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting with our data over here to make a little room. I see that visually I have a lot of wasted space only because my titles are taking up so much room. So there's a lot of different things we could do here, and one thing that we'll do is we'll change the way these labels here, these four labels. So I clicked and dragged from B1 through E1, okay? And I'm going to set those format, wrapping, wrap. So the text inside there will wrap. So it already even occurred for met quota. So now I can come to the column width, so the line between E and F, and I can drag over to the left a little, get rid of some of that wasted space, and I'll go across here and reduce each of these column widths. These are going to get a little tricky because there's even more words in there. There. So I've just saved a lot of room. I'll even just save some room here. I'll leave these here because we're just practicing with these functions. So you can see I've created a lot of extra space width-wise. Now we're going to build a statement that combines the or and the if statements. So you could see in G2 is where we had that or statement. And so if I use an if statement in here, then I could get these words to say something else other than true or false by combining with an if statement. The main statement is going to be an if, but since I already have this whole or statement that works correctly, I'll leave it there, and I'm going to go up onto my formula bar in the upper left, and I'm going to modify this. So I'm going to click after the equal sign because this is really going to be an if statement. So I'll put the if statement in there, and I'll put the open parentheses, and there's my logical expression. The whole first part is done already. Or B2 greater than 100, D2 greater than 200. Put a comma here and a space to put the value if true. And you can see the help box is sort of walking me through, and I know I'm doing it correctly as I go along. So the value if true will be in quotations. I'll put great, close quotations, comma, space, open quotation, space, close quotation. And now I have to close my entire statement with the closed parentheses. And if I had an error at this point, it would let me know that. And so it looks pretty good. I'll leave it there. And now I'll hit enter. Awesome. So I'll click in G2. I'll grab the autofill handle, drag it all the way down, and I get great appearing There's the formula. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to put that in. Now we're going to get into some variations of the if function. Once again, I'm going to insert a column right here, and I'll click in I2 to create my function. Here I typed in the function. It's called sum if, S-U-M-I-F, I-F. And so what it's going to do is it's going to sum, add up. That's what that means. It's going to add up something if something else is true. So the first parameter is the range B2 through B8. So it's going to add up or sum this range B2 through B8 if the item is greater than 50. So I'll hit enter, and my result is 132. So it looks like what it did was it added up the quantity sold for pens, pads, all the way down through paper clips, all of those smaller sellers. So this could be interesting for a business to know what all of its smaller sellers even added up to in the larger scheme of things. Here are two other similar functions that work somewhat in conjunction with this first one. So the second one is called count if. So the rest of it's identical. So what it will do is it will count the number of items that are less than 50. So that's interesting to know. I have a total and then how many items fell into that category. And then the third one is average, and it will average up all of those items that fell into that statement. So here they are. Pause the video and give each one of these a try. Now we're going to get into some lookup functions. And the first one is VLOOKUP. Now I pulled up the help menu so you can see there's really useful information here, especially when you're learning how to use these functions. So here's an explanation of VLOOKUP. You have known information. You can use VLOOKUP to search for related information by row. And here's a really nice example. It might be hard for you to see this looking at my video here, the actual formula, but what it says is it's looking up this column here for orange and it's returning this value over here. So they have this special section of their spreadsheet that's looking for that one particular item for some particular business reason, I suppose. So we'll build that now as we go along, and I'll use the insert function, okay, and I can go to lookup and choose VLOOKUP. So it begins that for me. It gives me a little explanation. And remember, you can always hit learn more and you'll get that same information that I was just showing you, more detail, more examples. I believe there's even example files that you could download that have those functions inside of them. It's a great way to learn how to use this. So we have our search key. It's the thing that we're going to be searching for, then the range, and then which column we want to return. So I'm going to be searching for pad. So I'll put PAD in quotations. Before we create our VLOOKUP function, I'm going to sort my data because the lookup works a little better that way and it's easier to understand. So I'm going to select from A2 down to D8 all my raw data. This is only because I'm looking up item, but I might want to return a value from any one of these other cells. Oh, maybe I should include met quota as well. So I'll start over again and I'll go all the way down like that. So that's my raw data. You don't have to worry about these other columns because those are formulas that will just regenerate. It doesn't matter. I'll go to the data menu and sort sheet by column A to Z. And now that's sorted in alphabetical order. Now I'll click in I2 to begin creating my VLOOKUP formula. I'll go up to the function command, down to lookup, and choose VLOOKUP. The item I'm searching for is ruler, so I put ruler in quotations and then a comma. I put the range that I'm searching, which is A2 through A8. I'm searching down that column for the word ruler. And now I want to return the value from a particular column in my range that I previously selected. So this is considered column 1 in this array. And this is column 2, column 3, and column 4. So I would like to return the total sales. So I'm going to put a 4 in there for column 4. And now my whole function is created, and I'll hit enter and see what I get. A2 through D8. So I'm going to be searching the first column for ruler, but I have the ability to pull data from any one of these cells. And I'll put the comma, and I want to return the information from total sales, which in this range is considered the fourth column, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll put a 4 in there, and I'll press enter. And so it looked down that column, found ruler, and it pulled the data from the fourth column over. Here's a close-up of what that looks like. So go ahead, you can pause the video and give that a try. And I did some special formatting here just to make that stand out. So this is my ruler sales. For some reason, I wanted that to jump out at me in my spreadsheet. Here's the rest of the function completed and zoomed in. So after putting in the item that we're looking for, ruler, we then put in the full range, A2 through D8 in this case. So it includes the column that you're searching for the item in, and any columns that you might want to return the value of to this cell way over here. So in this case, I'm looking to return total sales, so that's why I need to go all the way to D8. And this range includes 4 columns. And so we can tell the function which column we want to pull the data from. So this is column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4 in this range. And I want to return, in fact, the value from column 4, where column A, or column 1, equals ruler. So I'm looking to return the total sales, 202 and 44 cents. And it did what I was looking for, and I went ahead and did some special formatting there. I put a label in there, I highlighted yellow, I bolded, centered, and things like that. Now we're taking a look at the horizontal lookup, or the H lookup feature. And to do so, I've prepared a few things. So I'm going to be working in column K. I created a heading called special discount, and this is where I'm creating my formula right here in K2. But one other preparation I did was I created a little special discount little table over here. So you can go ahead and do this when we pause. I just put 20, 30, 40, 50, and I put 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. These are special discounts that I might want to apply if certain information is true. And so I'm combining two things here. So the H lookup is similar to the V lookup, and V is for vertical and H is for horizontal. So in the V lookup, we were looking down a vertical column. In H lookup, we're looking across a horizontal row. So we're going to be searching in the first row of our set of data. So we're going to be searching across here, and we're going to be pulling data from any other rows below that when we only have one other row. My purpose here is to search across this first row with my quantity sold. So as my quantity sold increases, I'm going to give a slightly higher special discount. So looking at my formula in my function, I have HLOOKUP. I'm building it right here, B2. So I'm looking at B2, so this quantity here, It's going to go to the table, and notice I put $, so it's absolute. Now, first I selected the range, and then I went back and inserted the $signs. Sometimes it's a little easier to do that. But what I have here is $I, $11. So that's this cell here. Absolutely that cell all the way through L12 absolute, L absolute 12. So that when I copy this formula down this column, the reference to this little special table will not change, right? Normally, the spreadsheet will change the references to all of your columns and rows as you copy a formula down, but I don't want to copy the formula. I don't want to change the reference to the columns and rows as I copy that formula down. And I want to return the value from the second row in my little special table. So it's going to return that percentage rate. So this is a close-up look of what's in the first cell, and it's looking at B2. It finds 42. It's looking across 20, 30, 40. It met the threshold of 40, but not quite 50. So it does a test, and it stops at 40 and returns the 0.7. And when I copied this cell down, this formula, right, the reference to the table stays the same, and it does my test. It takes the 25, it goes across, it finds 20, goes down to the second row, and pulls the 0.5. A few more functions that are similar to lookup are index and match. And here I've created two, and I'm going to explain them as we go along. So the first one is index. We have a range, and then we have two additional parameters. And the way this works is pretty straightforward. We have a range, A2 through D8 of our data, and we're looking down row 4 over to column 2. So row 4, column 2, and it returns the value of 219. So I've created that formula up here. Okay, when we combine the index function with the match function, we can do some really interesting things that VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP are not capable of. So you could see I started off similarly here with index and the same range of data, except now I'm going to try to match. I'm going to try to find 899 in this particular range, C2 through C8. So C2 through C8, I'm looking for 899. So when it matches it, then I want to return the value by matching, looking for item across this range. And so it finds item, and it goes down to where it matches 899, and it returns push pins. So it's kind of like a very powerful VLOOKUP, where VLOOKUP only allows you to look down the first column and pull information from any of the other columns. This setup lets you look down any column, search for data, and return data from any other column. Feel free to try that now if you'd like. Pause the video. Now we're going to take a look at text functions. This is different ways that you can manipulate text. And I'll just go to the functions button to text, and you can see the long list of different functions that are available to manipulate text. To work with text functions, I created some additional data here. And you can do this in a moment. It should only take you but a minute. And what I did was, down here, I created a new sheet. It becomes a new tab. And I placed it right here after discount. I renamed that tab called Customers. I typed in A1, last name, comma, space, first name. And then I put all of the names, last name, comma, space, and then a first name. So I just made up names. You can use the words that I have, the names, or you can make up your own. Pause the video now and prepare this. Before we get started working with the text functions, we're going to split this data out into two columns. So we're going to separate out the last names from the first names. So whenever you have data entered and it's separated by a punctuation, typically a comma, we call that a delimiter. And databases can read the information in databases in cells like this and then manipulate the data separately. So we're going to highlight rows 1 through 5 in column A. We're going to go to our data menu and we're going to split text to columns. Split text to columns. Voila! We've separated out our data into their own individual columns. We can do a lot more with our first names and our last names when they're separated out like this. Now I'll just shrink these column widths a little bit so we're not wasting too much space on our screen while we're practicing here. I've created 3 functions that we're going to talk about. So you can see how we have last name column and first name column. Well, I would like to have those names together in one cell. So this function called concat takes 2 pieces of text and puts them together. So it's pretty straightforward. It's concat, and I have B2, comma, A2. So B2 and then A2. So the first name and then the last name. Well, the concatenate function allows you to do one additional cool thing, and that is to add something in between. And so here I've added a space. You could see that there are quotes, one space, and close quotes. So it's concatenate B2, comma, space in quotes, comma, A2. So we have the person's first name and last name with a space, and that looks quite nice. This last command, it gives us the same results in this simple example, but it is much more powerful. And in this case, it looks sort of like this. It's called text join. And we're able to put whatever, added text we want, including a space. And it's going to go down a column and see if there is some data in there. And if there's data in there, then it will go ahead and take 2 pieces of data and put it together. So this is a little more powerful than just the concatenate command. In a moment, you can pause the video and give this a try. Just to be clear, these are the functions that I put in these cells up here. So Gianna Smith here, concat B2. So these formulas here reside in the cells up here. Concatenate was put in D2 and text join was put in E2. I just put them here so they're bigger and clearer for you to see. So go ahead and catch up to where we are now. Pause the video and get this situated. I went ahead and cleaned up the screen a bit. I copied the formula down. Oh, but first I eliminated 2 columns. What I did was I kept the column, the middle one that we created, concatenate, because that does exactly what we need to do. Concatenate B2 space A2, and I copied that down. Go ahead and do that yourself to get your spreadsheet looking like my customer spreadsheet. Pause the video now if you need to. We'll take a look at a few more text functions right now. So we're going to look at the left function. So equal, L-E-F-T, open parentheses. So I'm going to get the first initial of the person's last name. So click on A2, and I don't have to put anything in there after that, and I hit enter. So it simply returns the first letter of that character string of the last name. If I manipulate this further, you can can actually put a second parameter in here, comma, space, and you can put the number of characters you'd like to grab from the left of that name. And I'll copy and paste that down or use autofill. And I've got the first 3 letters of the last name. Sometimes this is necessary when creating customer numbers or invoices or things like that, where you need more than just one letter, but not quite the full last name. This would work the same for the function called right, where you can get the rightmost character. And then there's a function called mid. So here I'll undo some of this and I'll go in here and we'll change the left to mid. So the mid function requires 3 parameters. So you could see here the explanation. We have the character string, we have the starting point and the exact length. So we'll just change this. We'll leave this A2. We'll start at, okay, we could leave the start at the 3rd character and the exact length will be 2, let's say. Maybe not, a necessary example for working with this customer list, but it is pulling characters from the middle of the last name. So maybe we need some random characters in this case, or this function would be better used for something else. So I'll actually undo this and go back to having the first initial of the last name, which is the left function, equal left, and then these. To proceed with our examples, I'm going to change this one just back to left, and I'll grab A2, comma, 3. So we'll grab 3 characters from the left, right? In this case, SMI. I'll copy and paste this down. We have the first 3 letters of the person's last name, which could be useful for some kind of code or invoice number or things of that nature. Now we'll use a new function called upper, which will make these letters all uppercase. So upper, and then you put the text inside. So I'll click on D2, I'll close the parentheses and press enter. So it's taken those 3 letters and made them all upper. And I'll drag that down using the autofill. To get this all done in one function, I could put one function inside of the other. You've been starting to see this earlier in the video and you'll see it again here. So I need to take this function in D and put it inside of this function. So since this function is very simple, it's upper of whatever's inside the parentheses, I'm going to take this left, I'm double clicking and then dragging to the right, going to copy that and then click on E2 and I'm going to put it inside of the other function. So I'll click here on E2, I'll click inside, and instead of it having D2, the actual cell, it will be the left of A2, comma, 3 characters long. And I'll hit enter, and good, I've got, that looks right. And I'll click and drag my autofill button down. And now I have that completed all in one step. I no longer need column D. I'll right click on that, delete that column. I'll resize column D. And now we have our little abbreviated words here that are necessary for some other business function. Along the similar lines of the upper function, we have here 2 other functions. I'll click in E2, and that's called lower. So it takes a character string and puts it all in lowercase. And here in F, we have an example of what's called proper. So it looks at the set of letters and it puts it into a proper case where the first letter is capitalized and the remaining letters are lowercase. This can help clean up your data in various ways and also do cool things for creating character strings that are parts of words. So go ahead and practice these. We have, if you remember, we use the left and then we use the upper and then we combine the upper and the left. And in E we put lower and then in F we put proper. Go ahead and give those all a try. Pause the video now. I went ahead and deleted those two functions that we were just practicing with, and we're back to our screen looking like this. And now we're going to try a function that counts the characters in a character string and gives you the length. So it's called len, L-E-N. So it looks like this. Equal L-E-N, open parentheses. And keep in mind, this is a perfect example where you could see the tips that Google Sheets has given you, and they're giving you an example right there, and they're telling you what needs to go inside there. The text needs to go inside there. And we know that by pointing to a cell, that's the same thing. So I could visually point to this cell and close my parentheses and hit enter. My result is 12, and that looks right. And now I'll copy and paste this down or use the autofill, and I have my length of characters of my full name field. The last thing we'll talk about for now regarding text is actually not a function itself, and doesn't only apply to text, but it is more typical with dealing with text, and that is cleaning up your text. And so I'm going to select my range of text that I want to deal with, go to the data menu, and somewhere near the bottom is data cleanup. And you can see, and I know my data doesn't really need this kind of cleaning up because it's such a small data set, but there are suggestions that you can follow. You can choose the command called remove duplicates, which will analyze the columns that you choose. I could even say it has a header row because it does have a header row, so it won't include that. And it will remove duplicates if it finds them. I'll hit cancel. And that last choice there, data cleanup, was trim white space. So sometimes in a length of text, maybe in an address or something, someone puts in extra spaces where it's not needed. And so these are your data cleanup features. Now we're going to take a look at date functions. So when I go to my functions command and I go down to date, you can see all the many different date functions that appear. When it comes to dates, they're an interesting data type, whereas with text, it's a little more straightforward. With regular numbers, we know that we can perform mathematical equations, but with dates, the date has to be converted to a regular number in order for calculations to be done on the dates. Sometimes you also want to take the month and the year and put them together as a date. Here you see three examples that I've created. One is the today, another is the now, and another is the day. And they look just like that inside of these cells up here. So today produced this result. Now produced the same date with the time. And day E2 looked over here in E2 and returned the day. Give those a try now if you'd like. Pause the video. I cleaned up my workspace a little bit, got rid of some of the practice items and tidied up these columns. I'm going to go ahead and copy this down, and I get the same result because it's simply today's date. And I'm going to create a mathematical expression to calculate the amount of time between these two dates, between the start date and today's date. So that looks like it's a simple mathematical formula. So it's equal this day minus this day. Oh, and it even recognizes that that might be what I'm looking for. So I'll just go ahead and hit enter. And it gives me a number. I'll go ahead and copy that down. Now that I have that number, I could do different things. I could sort my table from largest to smallest, or to find out who's been with us the longest. I could do other things with that information. Here's a few more date functions. You can see the first one is equal year frac E2 comma F2. So I put that in this cell here, H2. So year frac E2 F2. And what it does is it gives you the result in years into the fractions. So sometimes that's a little making more sense, I should say, than looking at the number of days. So at a quick glance, I could see 21 years. This other formula here gives you the net working days. So it takes out weekends and such. And so it does that same calculation and gives you the net working days. So maybe that makes sense if this is sort of like an employee database, maybe. Named functions is a way that you can create a function. You create a name and then you build the purpose of the function. So you go up to the data menu and you choose named functions. And when you get here, they really have a lot of learning material here for you at this point because this really is an advanced feature. There's an example that you can view. You can watch a demo. You can learn more. You can add a new function when you're ready. And lastly, if I have already created named functions and added them, and now I'm in another spreadsheet, I can import a function that I named from another sheet into this sheet. We're going to cover a few more things that have to do with data, and one is called data validation. So for instance, the start date, it's very important that that be an actual date. So I'm going to select that column, and I'll even select extra columns because I know I'm going to be adding over time. And I'll go to my data menu and choose data validation. And this window pops up on the right. I'll click add rule. And notice what happens. And now you go into your criteria and you can choose the thing that you want to test. So I want this to be a valid date. So this field has to be a valid date. And I have some options here, and one is the default is to show a warning, which is great. And I'll choose done. So let's see what happens when I put in something that's not a date. I get a little red flag there, invalid. Input must be a valid date. Now we're going to look at a feature called conditional formatting. So you can format parts of your data based on some condition. It's a really neat feature. So for instance, let's choose this start date. And maybe I'd like to highlight the folks that started before 2010 or something like that. So I'll go to my format command, conditional formatting. The range is filled in for me, and now I go to the format rules. So format the cells if, and then I get to start choosing items here. Format the cells if the date is before. Hit this drop down, not today. I want an exact date. And I'll put the value in. January 1, 2011. And I get to choose the colors and do other kinds of formatting if I want. But I'll just leave that default, the fill color. And I'll hit done. And I'll click elsewhere so you could see that. So if I did this for this whole column every time, you know, a customer was added or a date was inputted that was before 2011, then we would have that green highlight in that cell. We're going to look at different ways that you can group information on your spreadsheet. So what we're going to do is group columns A and B together. So I'll select A and drag across to B. I'll go to the View menu and choose Group. And we have this choice, Group Columns A to B. And not much has changed in my view, except now there's this little minus sign here pointing to this area. And when I click that, it essentially collapses that and hides that group. So I can work with my spreadsheet knowing that that data is still there, but it's hidden. And I could click plus at any time to get it back. Right now I'm going to undo that. We're going to look at another feature called merge cells, which is very popular because sometimes you want a piece of data to span across several cells. The first thing I'm going to do is insert a row above my headers. So I'll click on one, I'll right click there and insert one row above. And then I'll click in cell A1 and I'll put name and hit enter. Well, what I really want is name to span across these three cells here. So I'll select all three cells, A1, B1, C1, and I'll format merge cells. And in this case, it doesn't matter, but I will choose horizontal just to keep it simple. Merge horizontally. So I've merged those three cells horizontally. Okay, so far you don't notice anything different. But what's cool is now when I go to my alignment and I center align, I've now centered that word across those three cells. And I could even do things like fill and put a fill color in there. And again, I could further manipulate this. I could make the font size bigger for that and do different things. So if you want to practice any of these things up to this point, go ahead and pause the video now and go ahead and try these out. In a moment, we'll take a look at a new topic, but in the meantime, as you can see, once again, I'm back on my main sales tab, and I've deleted some of the columns where we did a lot of practicing. So if you want to tidy yours up and get your sheet to look like mine, go ahead, pause the video now, and go ahead and do that. Now we're going to look at a concept called pivot tables. A pivot table takes your data the way you've arranged it and offers you another way to analyze that data, to select information from rows and columns, rearrange it, and perform calculations and summary information. To create a pivot table, you go to the Insert menu and choose Pivot Table. I'm going to move the screen just a little bit out of my way and go ahead and select my data range over again. To create a pivot table, I'll first select my data range, starting with the column headers that I created. In fact, I'll just stop here at this data point here. So from A1 through D8, and then I'll choose Insert Pivot Table. And it pre-selected the data range, and I'll want it to go to a new sheet. I'll hit Create, and it creates that tab down at the bottom for me. The first thing I'll look at are the suggestions here. So when I hit the drop down, it makes suggestions about some meaningful ways to look at my data. So I'll choose the first one, sum of quantity sold, etc. And yes, this is similar to some of the data I've already looked at, but it's not quite the same, and it does have a different look and feel to it that can be helpful. I can look at my other fields over here, maybe cost per item, and drag that down and have it go into a column. And so I look across the top and I see my cost per item in increasing order, my 49-cent items, my $2.99 items, and so forth. And so at a quick glance, I could see that and look down and see my pencil information and then see my pen information by looking across here. Now we're going to look at how you can filter your data using something called a slicer. So I'll go ahead and I'll select my data set from A2 to H8, and I'll choose the data menu, add a slicer. And this tip comes up, it tells me to select a column first. And notice on the tool settings over on the right, I get to choose the column. So I'm going to choose Met Quota. And now I have this slicer. I can move this around. It's a quick way of filtering all my data by Met Quota. So right now, all are being shown. And if I click that drop down and I only want true, I'll just uncheck false. Okay, or I could clear all and then choose false or true. And I'll click OK. And so I've just filtered my data by Met Quota where it's true. I could clear them all, choose false, click OK. And now I view all my data where Met Quota is false. That's called a slicer and it's found in the data menu. Go ahead and give that a try now if you want. Pause the video. I redid this filter to show all of my data for us to continue along here. And now we're going to take a look at a feature called macros. So macro is a really cool feature where you can record a whole bunch of steps, a whole bunch of commands in Google Sheets and save that and give it a name so that you could use it again in the future. A common use of this is when you frequently find yourself resorting your spreadsheet by different criteria and then need to resort it again back to the way it was. So as you use a spreadsheet and sort it one way to view it and then sort it another way, sometimes that can take a lot of time going to the sort command and filling in and choosing all of the choices. So let's go ahead and create a few macros that perform sorting for us. So I'll go to the extensions menu and I'll choose macros, record macro. I get a blinking red light here that says it's recording a new macro at the moment. So I'll go about the process of performing my sort like I normally would do. So I'll choose all of my information that I want to sort. I'll go to Data, Sort Range, Advanced Range, Sorting Options. Because it's not a straightforward sort, so I'll choose Data has header row. That's really helpful when I've selected my headers in my range. And let's say I'm going to sort by quantity sold in reverse order. And if in fact there was another column that I wanted to sort, if there were common quantity sold, then I could subsort by another. I know my data doesn't have that, but that is something that you can do. So I'll choose sort, and my data went ahead and sorted that way. Looks like what I want, and I can now save the recording. I'll be prompted for a name, and I'll save that. Now I'll create another macro to sort another way. So I'll choose data, sort range, advanced range. Data has a header row. And I'll sort by, well, these don't have headers, but let's see, I'm going to sort by G and H where I have great and wow. So sort by G, and I'll leave it A to Z. Sort by another column, H, and I'll leave it A to Z, and you'll see what happens. Hit sort. And so I have all my regular items up at the top, and then I have my great and my wow. And this is where my sales were higher, my quantity sold was higher, and things like that. If you remember, we created these complex functions in here to do that. And maybe I would reverse sort that so that these would show up at the top. But that's an example of a little more of a compound kind of sort, which would take a little more effort to create each time I wanted to sort that. Now we'll create another macro to sort another way. So I'll go up to Extensions, Macros, Record Macro. Shows me that I'm recording with that flashing red. And I'll go ahead and Data, Sort Range, Advanced. Data has a header row. Actually, in this case, we didn't have headers, but I'm looking at G and H there, where I have those signifiers for really good sales. So I'll sort by column G, and I'll do Z to A as well. Sort by another column, add another sort column, and it assumes H, which is great. And I'll do Z to A as well. And I'll hit sort, take a look at my data. Oh, look at that. So I have all my indicators for my great sales sorting up to the top. And then wow, there was some extra look at total sales, I believe, when we created those. I'll hit save. I'll give that a name and I'll click save. So I created these two macros to sort all of my data by two completely different ways because I tend to switch back and forth often. So when I go up to the extensions menu and look at macros, I have these created macros right here. So I could resort by quantity sold right there. You might get asked to have to give permission to have macros run in your spreadsheet. Which is very, very important. And I guess it depends on how your settings are set up. But you have to understand that because a macro performs a set of commands, there is a security risk there, right? If someone, infiltrated your computer system or you opened an email with a spreadsheet and there was a macro in there and you were told to run that macro, so it's just something to be aware of. But I know that I created those two macros that simply sort, so I give permission. As you can imagine, the possibilities are endless for creating macros that perform any sets of commands that you're interested, maybe even formatting your spreadsheet to look two totally different ways at the click of that button. When you want to go beyond macros and create custom apps inside of your sheets to work with Google Sheets and other Google applications, you can use Google Apps Script. It's actually a rapid application development system using JavaScript, and there's a built-in code editor that lets you code specific procedures for your Google Sheet. We'll take a quick peek by going to the Extensions menu, and just below Macros, you'll see Apps Script. And when I go there, in fact, you'll see the macros that we created, and there's the scripting coding that's behind the scenes of the macro. So you can actually start to understand a little bit of this programming language by looking at macros that you created by recording. There's the sort by quantity sold and the sort by great and wow macros that we created. This could be a whole course unto itself, but taking a quick peek here gives you a little idea of what the possibilities are. Up till now, we have already learned many ways to sort and filter our data. We've created the slicer, we've created a pivot table, all different ways to look at your information. And there's yet another way that we didn't talk about yet. So while my information is still highlighted, A1 through H8, I'll go up to the Format menu and choose Convert to Table. And there's a bunch of tips that come up, and I won't go through that right now, so I'll just close the tips. And I'll just move my little slicer a little bit out of the way. And so what happened with this table? So, well, first there's some formatting that happens. There's some color, and there's all these little drop down arrows next to my column. So when I hit this drop down, there's different things I can do. And I can easily sort by this column. And I can filter and I can, so there's quick and dirty ways to manipulate your data by turning your spreadsheet or part of your spreadsheet into a table. I'll undo that for now just to get my spreadsheet looking the way it was looking. So you highlight your data and you go to Format, Convert to Table. Go ahead, give that a try if you want, or anything that we've done up to this point. You can pause the video now. Now we're going to spend a little time working with a feature called Forms. Now, Google Forms is an application unto itself, and it can be used outside of Google Sheets, but in a way, it is very closely connected to Google Sheets because data that's collected in a form can be stored inside of a Google Sheet. A form can be as simple as a survey where you're collecting information from others. And the form itself can quickly show you the results, even in graphical format. However, if you really want to manipulate that data, then you can have it go to a spreadsheet and you can fine-tune it there. Meanwhile, Google Sheets has forms built into it. So while you're working with a set of data already and you want to create a form to collect some external information, or even to use as a way for you or a colleague to periodically record information in an easy to use format, then you can do so right inside of Google Sheets. I'll go to my Tools menu and choose Create a New Form. I'm thrown into another tab, and here I am in the Google Forms product, and it makes a couple of assumptions. It calls my form the same name as my spreadsheet, and it's ready for me to build my first question. Here you can put a description. Here is where you can name your first question. Here is where you list all the possible choices or answers for the question. Here is where you can change the question type. Multiple choice is the default choice. Most questions in a form or a survey are multiple choice, but there are different choices that you'll see in a moment. You can copy this question if you have to make another question that is similar to this question. You can delete this question if you no longer need it. You can choose to make this question required by moving that slider to the right. This is a really important consideration in building forms or surveys. So if you're really trying to collect specific information, then you might want to make those fields or those questions required to be answered. Here we have a bunch of other commands which we'll touch on today. And the first one is probably the most used. It's the plus. It's where you add another question. Once this form starts getting used, you can go see the responses. And there's the Settings tab to get to the settings for this form. The Preview button lets you see what your form looks like up to this point of development. Very useful to use throughout the process of building your form. Remember, the Google products are powerful in a sense that you have the ability to share with others. And here we have the little person symbol with the plus. This is where you can add a collaborator in developing and in managing and in looking at the responses. Okay, so this is a little different than when you're working with other products. Okay, here you can add a collaborator. But when you're ready to start collecting information from others, you're going to publish this form. Okay, and then there's a bunch of ways that you can share it. Typically, you'll get a link to it, and you can embed that link in an email or put it on a website, or if it's only used internally for yourself. I went ahead and put a description in up here. I went ahead and I added my first question. Which was your favorite product this year? And then I filled in some of these choices, pens, pads, rulers, and I used the other choice there to allow the user to click and put in other. And I made this a required field. Let's make believe we're building a short survey here for our top customers to give us some input. I'll go ahead and I'll click the plus on the right to add another question. I'm going to scroll down a little so you can see a little easily. And I'll go to the question type and I'll go ahead and I'll change that. I'm going to choose the checkboxes. Right? In a checkboxes question, a person can check as many as applicable to the question. I typed in the new question. Which new products would you like to see us offer? And I put in these choices: printer paper, highlighters, markers. I made the question required. I'll add one more question. We'll make it a little more of an open-ended question. So we'll choose short answer. I added the short answer question and I wrote, please add any comments or suggestions regarding our services. And I'm not going to make it required because it's sort of an optional thing for the participants of the survey to answer. I'm really more interested in collecting the data from up above. So now I'll use my preview button to see how this form is coming along. Asterisk indicates a required question. This is exactly how it would look when the participants take the survey. What's your favorite product this year? I could even practice using it to see if it's responding the way I think. I could check more than one. That's what checkboxes are for. And if I want, I could put something in the comments here. And I cannot submit at this point because the form isn't accepting responses right now. So please be aware that this opened up in another tab in my browser. Okay. And so typically when you're done viewing this, you would just close this tab and go back. If you ever accidentally closed the original editable form and you're in the preview mode, in the bottom right, there is a edit button, that little pen looking tool where you can go back to edit mode. But what I like to do is to keep these tabs, reduced a little bit. We'll just close that preview. And I'm back on my editable form. We'll take a quick look at settings. So, the Forms tool is used in teaching and learning, and it interacts with Google Classroom, where Google Forms becomes a quiz. You could hit these drop downs to see how these choices work for you. Be aware that the default is that this will typically be what we'll call anonymous, the collection of the data. You're not collecting the email address. And there's some other choices here regarding how the responders can respond and edit their responses and things like that. The presentation of your form. So there's a bunch of little choices here, a progress bar, shuffle the questions if this was, like a quiz or something. And you can see some other choices here. And the bottom part here is actually the ability for you, if you use Google Forms a lot, you can change your defaults going forward. So you can hit these drop downs and you can tweak some of the defaults going forward for yourself. So like change the default from not collecting email addresses to collecting email addresses so that the choice up above would be different by default. So now we're going to go ahead and publish this form. So I'll click the publish button. Notice that it says responders there, right? So Do you want only specific people to respond to this form? So if it really is a small collection of people and you don't want anyone from the public, either purposefully or accidentally, getting this link and inputting data, then you can input specific people. So if it was a set of, I don't know, 30 customers and you really don't want it to go beyond that, you would have to put in all 30 email addresses. But if you're not as concerned about that and you really do want to make it easy for lots of people to complete the survey, then you do not put anything in here for specific people as responders to the survey. You'll click the Publish button, and up in the upper right, there is a long link for you to send to people, and they give you the ability to shorten that URL. It might just look a little better, a little easier for you to copy and paste. And I'll hit the copy command, and now I can copy that somewhere else. I see in the upper right that my form is now published. I can copy that link and paste it somewhere else, like I said earlier, in an email or put it on my website. Sometimes, especially when I make a form available to anyone with the link, I like to test it out in an incognito browser window. Because right now I'm logged on to my Google account, so of course I'm going to have access to the Google form. But I want to see if others that aren't logged in, that aren't specific responders, that they have access to this form. So I'll go all the way up to my Chrome menu in the upper right, the three dots, and I'll click New Incognito Window. And I get this blank screen, and I can paste in my link that I just copied, hit enter. Now that I've published my form, I'm going to try out the published version of the form. So I'll go to a new tab in my browser and I'll paste in that URL that I just finished copying. And now I can complete the form and actually submit it. I'll close this tab because I no longer need it. I see that I have one response. I can take a look at those to see if this is really how I was hoping to collect my information. And with one piece of data, it might be hard to see, but we have a pie chart there, a bar graph here, and we have those other responses. And so if we did not start creating this form from our existing spreadsheet, what would happen is if this was a brand new form not associated with this sheet, and I want to view it in Sheets, I would click on this button, View in Sheets, and I would get the option of creating a new spreadsheet or adding this to an existing spreadsheet. But since we came from Google Sheets, it exists already. So I could either click here or I could just close this tab down and go back to my Google Sheet. But I'll click the button here, View in Sheets, and it loads my store sales Google Sheets. So now I have this open on another tab. I've got a little suggestion on my screen here. I'll just close that. And you can see that my information is in my spreadsheet. Kind of puts it into a table already for me to do different forms of manipulation. And it puts a timestamp on it, which is kind of really, really cool for some purposes. On the bottom of my screen, you can see that it created just yet another tab, another sheet that came right before my main sales sheet. So again, Google Forms is a tool that you can use outside of Google Sheets and even never choose to go into Google Sheets. Or you can have it create a sheet after you've collected data, or you can create a form right here inside of Google Sheets associated with a set of tables and a set of information already. This is a wrap-up of Google Sheets Advanced. We covered advanced functions, pivot tables, macros, forms, and more. Here we'll review. We got into some different functions, and here is an example of a logical function that we built. It was a combination of if and or, where we tested our data and then produced the word great in a column. Here we have an example of a function manipulating text, and it's called concatenate, where we took the first name and the last name and put it together with a space in between. We also merged cells. We also used dates and some functions that can perform calculations on dates. We created a pivot table, which is a great way to see your data in a different way and be able to analyze it quickly by choosing some choices. We created macros to sort our data by two different ways, which are common commands that we perform in our particular spreadsheet and saves us time. Even though Google Forms is a product unto itself, it is part of Google Sheets, and we built a form right inside of our sheet to collect survey information from our customers. And on the right, you can see the results were populated directly into our spreadsheet on another Sheets tab. Timeline view is something that we did not practice, but it is a interesting concept where when you're working with date information, you can really visualize your data in a nice way. And approvals is a feature where you can draft up materials, lock it, and have someone else view it and approve that version. Well, that's all. Thank you. This is the conclusion of our Google Sheets series.